Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Whining On. I'm Matt Bowden. I'm here today with Gary Animal. Gary, please tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm old. That's the obvious thing. And I started out in life, I guess, to be a painter. But I went to a foundation course and they told me I wasn't a painter, I was a sculptor. So I went and did sculpture, and then I decided I wasn't a sculptor. So then I became a pavement artist, and then I decided I wasn't a pavement artist because it hurt. So I became a magician, and I primarily became a magician because I wanted to work the street, and I couldn't juggle, and I couldn't do acrobatics because I barely move unless I have to. And magic just seemed like it was the easiest choice. So I became a magician. I have no great respect for magic. It just seemed the less difficult thing to learn. And then I became a street performer. That was and drifted into gigs and corporate parties and various stuff. Somewhere along the road,
Okay.
I bumped into Gazzo and we became friends. And then at the time, no one was making big cups, so I decided I would make cups. And so I started.
So you became a prop maker as well, then?
Yeah, because I did sculpture, so it was kind of obvious that I always make everything: puppets, tables, whatever I use, I tend to make it. I've even made my own silicon balls for a magic trick, which is absolutely ridiculous because I could have bought the Facchini ones for 25 quid and I spent 300 quid on silicon and ended up with 5 balls that weren't that great. Because
sometimes it's about the process of making these things, then.
I think it used to frustrate me. Very early on when I was performing, I was always annoyed that I would waste so much of my week making a perfect table, which was never perfect, or a perfect case that was never. And there's always been this desire to have everything minimal, and I really don't cope very well with stuff. And so if I made a magic table, I would work out a week later that I could make a smaller magic table that was 1 ounce lighter. And I mean, I made an amazing magic table once out of maple wood, and I ended up selling the legs to Pete Waddell because I sold him the top as well. Because basically the thing was too heavy to lift and he was stupid enough to buy it. So I think he still got it. But he doesn't mind because he does all that fitness stuff. So he doesn't mind lugging around a big table. But me, in a perfect world, it would all fit in one pocket and wouldn't weigh anything and would, should fit in your wallet, really, shouldn't it? So that's how I got into it.
So it sounds like you've done a lot of things in your life, and you're now a painter as well. Can I just go to the beginning of this story then? You said you were becoming an artist to begin with. Why go into creative practice? Why not become a plumber or a doctor?
Well, I wasn't going to be a doctor because I was a hypochondriac, and I already know too much and imagine too many illnesses to actually have studied it and ended up with all of the illnesses, imaginary or otherwise. So that couldn't work. And I was very heavily and passionate into physics and chemistry and maths. There are the things I really, I think the highest life form on Earth is a physicist in my world because they're the only part of the universe that's trying to understand itself. And then you come lower down and somewhere just above the bottom of the gutter, we've got the artists. But artists have more fun than physicists. So I thought if I did physics, I'd just have a headache, wouldn't I, at the end of every day? So I was good at art, and I did like painting. I mean, I grew up painting. I painted all the time and drew all the time, and so that was clearly something that.
Can I just ask you this? It may sound like a weird question, but why did you paint all the time when you were a young person?
I've no idea. Thinking back, I mean, I don't think I had a great childhood. I think my parents were, fine and looked after me and all that. My brother was a bit odd, and we never got on, and he's dead now, so that's sorted. But I don't know why. I wonder why. I just always have. I mean, it never occurred to me the why, because my earliest memories. I mean, kids get given pencils and they draw. With me, it's stuck. You give some kid a guitar and he becomes the guitar god. I wish somebody would give me a guitar. I can't play the damn thing. But there was never any music in my family, so music's my big weakness. I don't understand how music works. I understand how it works. I just can't emulate it or do it. So I think painting was something I could do.
Yeah. Did you study in painting then? Did you become
No,
schooled in it?
I was going to. I mean, I set off to foundation. I did my chemistry, physics, and maths A levels and stuff, and then I went to a foundation course to do some sort of art and design, and I wanted to be a fine art painter. But on the course, and this is the problem I have with education generally, is they told me I wasn't really a painter. I was too concerned about things, whereas, and I get it, because some painters just slap stuff on and it looks great. And I just get ever smaller and smaller and smaller. And like I'm painting a 5-foot painting with a brush. There's actually got no hairs on it, really. This is the brush. I don't even see the tip. It's a 10-0. Yeah, it's tiny, and I'm painting that Edinburgh painting with that because that's the brush. Because the heads are only that big, and I got to get a portrait in that sort of little space. So they were like, "Oh, you're a bit anal about it, or you can't be a painter. You never fucking finish one at that rate." Oh, I swore. Sorry, you'll never finish one at that rate. You're a sculptor. That's what you are. So I went off and did sculpture as a degree. But it turns out there's not a single piece of sculpture anywhere in the world that I actually like. The problem with sculptures is they don't look as good as paintings. Paintings emulate a 3D world, whereas sculptures are actually in a 3D world and they don't look as good as the stuff that's in the 3D world. So, sculpture of a tiger doesn't really look as good as a tiger, and nothing really looks as good as Concorde or a 747. So you're kind of wasting your time with sculpture. You just end up with Alexander Calder, Grand Rapids, which is a bit of welded steel stuck in some place. I slept on one of them once in Jerusalem. I climbed up the sculpture, found a ledge, and slept on it. But anyway, thanks, Alexander.
It's art
Calder.
with utility.
Not anyone knows who you are. Yeah. So there are bits of sculpture I do like. Don't get me wrong. I'm not slagging them all off. I mean, I actually think one of the best I've ever seen is at the Yad Vashem, the Museum of the Holocaust in Jerusalem. There's a harrowing sculpture of people on barbed wire and stuff, all very thin and obviously not having a good time. But that was a great piece of sculpture. But most sculpture don't really do a lot for me. Greek statues, seen one, seen them all. Who has a body like that? No one. So it turns out I am a painter. It's just I had 40 years off, basically.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I mean, I have a little beautiful picture to pause on. Hey, you're back. Hey, yeah, sorry, I lost you for a second, or you lost me.
No, I didn't lose anything.
We lost each in the interview, but it seems... Okay, fair enough. Is the only piece of sculpture you like?
I've lost you now.
Do something, it had a purpose. Was there something of that with sculpture? You felt sculpture didn't have a purpose for you? There was nothing you could do with it?
I just think it doesn't look very good. The problem is it's never as good as what it's trying to copy. Whereas paintings, you could say the same about paintings, but there's something about creating a 3-dimensional world in 2D that is fascinating for us. And that doesn't really exist with sculpture. You walk around a sort of carved granite hippo and you go, I think the real hippo looks better. So it's not always the case, but mostly and certainly my sculptures they were terrible. So they would be really just mathematical equations that I made lumps of and just.
And so, where was your head at when you came to the end of this? Then, when you came to the end of doing your degree, you've done sculpture now.
Well, I mean, I
thought I wanted to be an artist.
Well, I didn't think that. No. I wanted to travel. I always wanted to travel. And I went to Israel on a kibbutz during the summer break in my first year. And I think I went to Morocco the second year. And I think that busking, in a sense, pavement art first and then shows, was as much about wanting to see the world as it was perform or do anything, really. I think if I'd have been born rich, I'd have done nothing. I'm quite happy doing nothing. I don't have a great desire to do anything, although I probably would still paint. But that's besides the point. I would probably paint even if it wasn't for money, which it isn't most of the time. I've got loads of paintings that I don't know what to do with. They're all over the place. So
it's a passion.
I don't know if it's that. I think I don't know. I got a feeling it's as much to do with how my head works as it is to do with anything else. I think it's that I'm not very good at doing nothing. as much as I like to do nothing, and I work hard to do nothing, and I try to do nothing, and I really practice being lazy and staying in bed and stuff. I remember going to a beach once with Deb when we were young, and it was idyllic. It was Koh Samui in Thailand before electricity got there, and before 3 million backpackers got there and got stoned. And it was idyllic, and you could live there in these little huts for like 10 quid a week, basically. I only lasted 2 weeks. I couldn't wait to get back to Bangkok, to be honest. I was like, wow. And the same happened in New Zealand. We moved to New Zealand for 5 years, and New Zealand is lovely and looks beautiful. And he goes, yeah, but it's beautiful, isn't it? I go, yeah, but you can't do a lot with beauty. You can look at it, and then you can look at it, and then you can look at it a bit more. But then you think, I just want a cafe, really, and I want a bit of life, and there's some bands and some hustle and bustle.
Are you supporting yourself by doing street drawing at this moment? When you're traveling around, so you've left uni, you're traveling around. Are you doing pavement art at this point? Have you began doing?
No. What happened when I finished is I was going out with Deb, who was a year or two younger than me. I can't remember. It's a long time ago. I wasn't going out with her when I left, to be honest. I was going out with somebody else, but she got pissed all the time, and I kept beaten up every time she opened her mouth when we were out. So I had to get rid of her, but that was besides the point, really. She was younger than me, and I had to hang around Loughborough. So I got a job as a template maker, which was in a factory filing these little metal things. It was quite well paid. It was boring, but I'd make these little things, and they'd run some kind of machine through it and produce these mouldings to the shapes that I'd filed out that had to be very precise. And I think I did that for a year or something, and mostly got drunk. I mean, that's what I remember about having a job, is I got drunk a lot. And then I think somebody started pavement drawing. It wasn't me, it wasn't Deb, but it was somebody else in the group, but amongst my arty friends, and I can't remember who it was. It's all a blur. And we thought we'd have a go at that as well. And Deb went, and she started making good money on the weekend doing pavement drawing. And she was always very good with colour, way better than me. I can draw lines, but my colour's a bit iffy. It all looks a bit the same to me. And then I went one Saturday, and I think I did some naff copy of some naff painting. I think it was a mucka or something, or some Art Deco-y type. I don't know what it was. I can't remember. But I did it in Sheffield, and I made more money in that one day than I made all week in the factory. So that was it. I was out there. I thought, right, I'm pavement drawing. And we did that and went around the world doing that. And I bumped into a few street performers.
And when you were, just before we go on with it, when you began pavement drawing and you said you copied something to begin with, how did your craft progress from that point? What was the second day like and the third day of pavement drawing?
Well, I could draw, so it wasn't really difficult. And I was doing it for the money. I wasn't doing it for art. I wasn't doing like some pavement artists do, like Peter Voice and people that will do original bits of art on the floor. I would just go and do a portrait of...
Could you explain who he is a tiny bit? Because people might not know Peter Voice is.
Oh, he's a pavement artist in Australia. Could you just explain for people who might not know? Well, he's a very good artist, not just... But he was a pavement artist back then, along with Bev in Australia. And when I was pavement drawing there with Deb, we met Bev and Peter Voice, and they were Australian artists, part of the Chalk Circle people now. And they did much...
What's the Chalk Circle?
Well, they're a group of Australian artists that did pavement drawing and got together, like Ulla, who married Nick, or didn't marry Nick. I can't remember whether they married or not. And so there was a group of them, and they did more original stuff than I did. I just would do like Humphrey Bogart or something, or a copy of a painting, because there was more money in that. People would go, ooh, you copied the Sistine Chapel. That means you're good. We'll give you more money. So I wasn't really doing it for any great art. I mean, the only bit I did that was vaguely arty is I made a 3D frame around it. It was about the only bit that was any fun. And I did have some epic days doing that.
And did that, I take it didn't bother you then that you weren't... It didn't bother you not doing it for pretensions of great art, that you were doing it for cash?
No, I never for a minute...
That's an important thing in the process.
Well, I never thought it was great art, because I was doing it on the pavement. It was going to wash off. So I couldn't really see the point in putting too much effort into it. Like, whereas you look at my painting that I'm doing of Edinburgh that's up there on the wall, which has got to have 130 faces in it. I've painted over that thing so many times in the last months, changing the sky, changing this, deciding that that's wrong and this is wrong. I painted 25 people and painted them out because the scale was wrong. So that is, for me, art. So it has to be right. And if it takes a year or 2 years, that's fine. But there was no point in going to that level to do some drivel in Rotherham on the street that was going to get washed off quite frequently while we were doing it, to be honest. And it was about money.
Like?
It was great money.
What was the life like being a paper artist? Did you go there early in the morning? Did you have to queue?
Very early. That was the down. Yeah. Well, that's partly how I became a street performer in a sense, because we would get up very early, Deb and I. We'd often work together because it was less fun. It was more fun than working on your own. Sometimes if we had bills to pay, we would sort of do the opposite end of the same precinct and double our money by each doing a drawing. But we'd get there very early, sometimes I think 7 o'clock or something, and we would start drawing so that there was something down on the street by about 9:30, 10. At least get one head done or something, so that there was something to look at. And we'd use hairspray and stuff to try and protect it as best we could. And we used really expensive pastels, Rembrandt pastels, which were expensive even back then. I think even in 1980 it was like 30 quid a drawing just for the chalks. So, but we were coining it.
We should really say what year is this we're at now?
About 1981, I think, as far as I can remember. Yeah. That's kind of I started. Being 1981.
And so you say this is how you became a street performer. So I assume you bump into people at the draws then if you're there that early.
Well, I wasn't really on those pitches because I was working any town that I felt. I was going to market towns. Rotherham, Sheffield, Barnsley, all sorts of places that you wouldn't really consider doing a show in necessarily. But I did occasionally get booked as a pavement artist to do somewhere like Droitwich was the first time I remember where I bumped into some of the early Covent Garden acts because they'd booked a bunch of Covent Garden acts. I can't remember who it was. And they booked a pavement artist. And I was like, free half-an-hour shows there. And I'd be on the floor all day. And then what happened was, I think the turning point, and again, this doesn't make me look too good. We were in Australia pavement drawing when we bumped into a few in Melbourne pavement artists, street performers. I can't remember who they were, but one of them was Noel Britton. I certainly remember Noel Britton because I hung around with him a lot. And what impressed me mostly was that they could earn really good money in 40 minutes without being on their knees covered in crap doing pavement art. So I thought, I'll switch. It's a shorter working day. Because I do strive towards laziness and minimalist. And if you could earn as much money in 1 hour that you do in 8 hours, it makes sense to me to do that. Now, I did get off to a bad start as a street performer because well, let's be honest, I stole Noel's show, didn't I? I just copied it. But to be fair, I had seen Sid Rasputin do a bucket of waterscape in Covent Garden as well. So I figured, oh, well, stick your head in a bucket, that's normal. Admittedly, I went too far when I called myself Noel Britton, but I wasn't very good in the beginning and I didn't want to get any flack for that. So I used his name. But, I mean, we're friends again now. It cost me a set of silver cuts, but there you go. But eventually I moved to a straitjacket and a table show as well. A table show never suited me. Just before we move on to this, can you talk about the experience of doing your first show? Yeah, I remember it well, actually, because whilst down the pub I was always naturally funny. I'm a good ad-libber. I'm not very good at remembering a script, so I can't be an actor. I'm not very good at remembering jokes, to be honest, either. But people tell me I'm very funny when I've had a couple of pints or I'm just down the pub or I'm wired in an up mood. And I was often the funny one. So I thought, well, I ought to be able to do this. If I can make people laugh down the pub, I should be able to do it in a show. So, I lifted most of Noel's show, wrote down the lines. Initially, I figured that I'm very mathematical about things, so I figured 3 things, one of which has got to be a fun tip, because any idiot can do that. Back then, I couldn't do a lot of magic. I wasn't really a magician at all. I could do a coin vanish and a coin roll, but that was only because I copied it off of Humphrey Bogart on a film, To Have and To Have Not, or Maltese Falcon, or whatever it was. So I thought, well, I'll do that, and then I'll stick my head in the bucket at the end, but I'll do something like that with the Siberian chain escape. And in the middle, I don't know, I'll throw something in the air because everybody else throws something in the air. I think it was a Diabolo at the time or something. I can't remember. We went to Rotherham. Deb was going to pavement draw, and I was going to do a show, and it was a Saturday. And Rotherham's not like the best place. I'm very green. I don't understand the difference between a well-heeled tourist town and a grim pit of the earth. No offence, Rotherham, but it sucks up there. So I went to Rotherham. The people were nice. It's just the place was grim. I went to Rotherham, and I put a rope out, and I shouted "Showtime," and I was gobsmacked. People stopped. They literally stopped and gathered around, and it was like, I wouldn't say there was a full edge, but there was certainly 50 or 60 people with their kids lining up where I'd laid the rope. I couldn't say a word. I just went completely blank. I went, I put all my stuff back in a bag and ran away. We left out. I've never been back to Rotherham since. So, and I wasn't prepared for the fact that my brain would crash due to the fear of being in front of an audience, which had never bothered me down the pub. But when it's a somehow different thing when you first walk out in front of the audience, it didn't work for me anyway. I was too nervous to relax. And the other thing is, I'm only funny when I'm relaxed or very stressed. It's got to be. I've either got to be very relaxed and happy, or about to get on a plane with an engine that's going to blow up. Then I'm quite funny because I know all the plane crashes and I just ran. But I couldn't be funny with this crowd because they were looking at me expecting me to be funny. And I was like, actually, normally when I'm down the pub, no one's expecting me to be funny. I can just chip in and be funny when I think of something and then back off out and have a swig of my beer when I've lost it. But you can't really do that in a show. You can't go, that's it. So yeah, I sucked.
Is that an element of like talking to you? I hear a lot of the time that there's a will to control, to put things in the right place, to have things ordered. And
yeah, I'm bored.
When you did the first show that you realised you didn't understand what was in front of you, and you didn't have the ability to control it. Because I'm trying to think from my own story, you know.
Yeah, I think it's partly that, but it's also partly that that I was just confused and lost it. And my head is really quite capable of a lot of things, but it does crash. It does have a time where it needs to reboot, and if it gets overloaded with too many things, I can calculate almost anything in a relaxed environment. But if you got me to do, it's like that old multitasking thing. If there's too much going in, like if I've got to worry about whether they're happy and where my edge is and what the trick is I'm doing and whether I'm putting a joke in, if I've got lots of things going on, my head just goes, oh, and I just like, and wander off. So
how'd you get over this then? How was the second show? How did you get through this issue?
Well, the second show, I got a little bit further, to be honest. I think I got past Magic Show. Ladies and gentlemen, Magic Show. Probably not much further than that, but one or two lines came out before it all went south. And I think by about the third show, I'd got as far as getting a kid out and trying to make a balloon doggy. And realising I can't blow a balloon up because I'm too nervous. And whilst I could do it at home, I can't do it now and I ought to buy a pump. So I was like, oh, sorry, let's run away again. So it's a bit like that. But there was a turning point about, I was a very slow learner. There were some people I've met, like Steve Faulkner, who I met when he was a young juggler. And like he said, I'm going to take up magic. And like a couple of months later, he was great at magic. I'm like, that was a bit quick, Steve, wasn't it? Most people spend...
The bastard.
Yeah, I know. So... Whereas I'm like, I'm still learning of attention vanish now, 40 years later. It still looks like crap. So some people are just really good at that sort of stuff. My problem is I'm not very good with my body. I don't really know what bits of it are doing at any given time. My head sits on the top of it, but beyond my head, I'm not really that interested. It's my hands I can control really well, but like I can't dance. I can't probably just look stupid most of the time when I'm walking around, and I'm not very aware of other people. My wife thinks I'm autistic and lack empathy. In some sense, that's good because it means I really don't care whether the crowd like me or not. So I didn't have the standard stage fear that a lot of people have. Because I'm quite logical. Right? Put me on a plane and the engine blows up, I'm probably scared. Right? I used to be terrified of flying in the early days because I was on a dodgy one. And I didn't really, it took me 3 years to get over that. But, you know, on a plane, it's going wrong. It's reasonable to be scared. On stage, they're booing, get off. Who cares? That's not really that upsetting, is it? It's like, the way I see it, you're just working a bit less if you get off quicker. Okay, it's not as nice as the applause, but it's not really a biggie. It's not, you know, having a look at a mole and deciding it's a melanoma. That's scary. But getting booed on people going, you're not very funny, that doesn't really bother me. So I stuck at it for 3 months.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And the turning point, not that it was a good show. At this stage, I have to say I haven't had a hat yet. I haven't got as far. In 3 months, I haven't got to the point where anyone's put anything in the hat. Not only that, I haven't actually...
And so you doing pavement art at the same time then? Are you double bubbling to pay for the learning of doing the show?
No, by this stage I'd made my mind up that I was going to be a performer, and Deb was pavement drawing, and I'm the sort of male who's quite happily kept. So if she was prepared to sit on her knees and scrub away painting and making the money, I was like, well, I just thought about and be a performer and learn this. So, you know.
So your partner was doing the hard work while you were out chasing your artistic intentions.
Yeah, but, you know, it's not exactly that much hard work, is it? You only went on a Saturday and a Friday. I mean, it was all right for Riley, really. It was it's a weekend thing. We went down the coal mines. So, and she was having her own kind of wanting to be a singer thing. Neither of us wanted to be pavement artists. We just happened to be quite good at it. So, yeah, so that it was 3 months. In 3 months, I never got to the end of a show where I did that with a hat and went, put some money in. I never got that far. And the first day I did was in another town called Peterborough. And I think we'd gone there. And no, I actually hadn't gone with Deb. I'd gone with a chap called Pete Mosley, who I think at the time knew Haggis and was a bit of a juggler, although he didn't become a street performer as such, but he was interested in it and he was thinking about becoming a street performer. And we went to Peterborough together, and he was going to do something and I was going to do something. And I actually got to the end of the show in Peterborough and passed the hat, and I made £7. I remember that. It was like £7.20, which is not great, it has to be said. It was certainly less than the petrol. But I'd actually got something going in the hat and got through the damn thing. And a chap come out of a shop, and it was a real turning point for me because he was in a suit and he was clearly pissed off. And he went, I just want to tell you, you've got the worst comedy timing I've ever heard in my life. That's what he said to me. And I went, I know. But in a year, it'll be good and you'll still be working in a shop. And I've always remembered that because I was like, I knew how bad I was. I just knew I'd have to work on it a bit. So
yeah, well, that's time spent, isn't it? And yeah, so what was the next? So you've got your £7-8 hat. You feel like, right, there's a show here. Do you take it and tour it around town then? Do you slowly develop it? What's the process of making that into a show you can make a living with?
For me, I had to find somewhere to work, and I was working shows in places like Leicester. And they weren't. It's a tough place to start because they weren't that good, you know, and they wouldn't be that good even when I was at the top of my game. I wouldn't go and necessarily work Leicester. It would not be the best show in the world. It would just be hard work. And then I found Stratford one day, and at the time, I think he's dead now, sadly, Robin DePublic. It was a toss-up between him and me who got to Stratford first. Some say he beat me there. Some say I beat him there. We don't know. But
what was his work like then?
He was quite good, actually. He went off and became a climber and stuff. But he used to tie a big slack rope across the canal and walk across and get a big crowd stuff. And I was still at this stage doing. I'd kind of tried to get away from the bucket a bit, but I was doing the bucket and I'd made a bag escape, and I made that many different things over the years to try and find something.
And so the bucket, I assume the bucket is you put your head in a bucket and then you escape.
Yeah, with the Siberian chain escape and flippers on and a mask and and stuff like that. And I did that for a while until I got relatively proficient at it, and then I switched to the straight jacket because it was actually easier, to be honest.
Fair enough.
And I did get good quite rapidly after that, because I got to the stage now where I was going on a Saturday and a Sunday, to Stratford. They kept trying to arrest me. Stratford was a really stuck-up town, and they didn't like any sorts of buskers whatsoever. But I was getting through shows, and they were. I did have a little spell where I went to York and tried, and I was getting like, £30 a show and stuff, and they weren't great shows. But it was I could feel certain
bits. You're getting towards the point of making a living.
Yeah, and I was getting to, but more importantly than that, I mean, I wrote it all down, and I'd list, and I wrote down. I'm very critical, and I drew a graph. So as long as and the graph was based on, I'd give it points out of for quality and points of money and points of tightness and blah blah blah. And so long as the line was going vaguely upwards, I knew I would get there. That was my logic. I figured if ever it sort of plateaued out and started to go back down again, I'd go and do something else, because it meant it wasn't going to get there. So I do need to keep track of things, and I did. But it became quite apparent early on that I wasn't very good, even when I wrote a script or wrote down Noel's show word for word, or Gazzo's Cups and Ball show. It became quite apparent that I can't keep to a script. It's really doesn't sound right. It just doesn't work for me. So I think, I don't know if you remember Humph. Do you remember Humph?
No, I don't know if I would.
Humphrey James.
No, I don't know if I met him.
He was in Covent Garden the same time.
No.
As he was there for years. He did the Straight Jacket there in about, I don't know, late 80s. But he said Mike Straight Jacket. Sorry? I lost you then for a minute.
I said, yeah, well, I was born in 1984, so I doubt I'd remember some guys from the late 80s in there,
Oh, sorry, you look so much older. But
thanks.
That's like my age. It's a fuzzy screen. Yeah, so Humph was he was like he had a very tight Straight Jacket show that always worked, always got the Straight Jacket off at the last fraction of a second and stuff. And he came to see me in Stratford, and he said a very complimentary thing. He said, your Straight Jacket show shouldn't work, but does. It's like organized chaos. He said, it's just all over the place. It's like slapstick. It's all over the place. I said, yeah, I don't even get it off sometimes. Sometimes the show ends and I'm still wearing it. Because I just muck around so much. And there's a downside to that. When you're on form, you do really, really well. And when you're less on form, you die on your ass, really, because you've got nowhere to go and you've forgotten everything. So, but ad-libbing's the only bit that I enjoy, really, if I'm honest.
And how did you find the ad-libbing grew out of your work? Did you have a moment where you realised that this is what I like to do? And then
I think it just, I think it was always there, and it just happened naturally. And it only started to come out when I got to the stage where I could do the tricks, whatever dumb trick it was, and get through the show in terms of the mechanics of it and manipulating and getting a crowd, etc. That it's only when I was relaxed enough to know that bit was like driving a car now, I can forget about that my personality was able to just ad-lib and do stuff. Before that, I was too like, what next? And then that you're not funny when you're thinking, where's the fun tip? And I still do that, to be honest. I lose it all the time. I'm a very messy worker.
When you're doing your ad-lib in your comedy, is there particular things that you gravitate towards, subject matters, situations?
No, it can be literally anything. And that makes me quite strong when I'm doing close-up, actually, because I can just do different material at every table. That works well for me, doing close-up in gigs. It works less well in a show scenario, I think, because shows ought to have a bit more structure than perhaps I give them. I've had shows that have looked incredibly good and everyone's thought, wow, that's amazing. And then I've done one afterwards and it's like, that's the worst show I've ever seen. So they were, even at my height, I could blow hot and cold depending on how much energy I put in and how much fun I was having, really. If I got a bit bored, I could wander off.
I don't think you're alone there.
No, I don't think I am either.
I think, the shows I enjoy tend to be, of course, not all of them, but a lot of them tend to be shows that aren't 100% certs. That work. People take risks. They take chances. They play with the moment. They try and experiment with something that's happening there. And sometimes that goes wrong, And
it does a lot. But I got to the stage where I realised, I suppose I'm about 3 years in now, or 4 years in, and I've been off to New Zealand and Australia and doing shows and stuff. And I'd got quite a tight show with the bucket or the straitjacket, and it was all working quite swimmingly in terms of making money. But when I looked back over those early years, there were certain shows, like I remember where, where really it was all wrong, and it was all going wrong, and shouldn't have been a show, and it was the wrong time, wrong place. Everyone was drunk or not drunk or blowing a gale. And those were some of my best moments, because I was having to think more on my feet than when any idiot could turn up in August in Stratford and get a crowd and go through the motions of a show. There wasn't really much challenge, but sometimes there are shows that sort of just happen when you think, wow, how did that happen? It's blowing a gale and I'm halfway up the mountain. So I started deliberately sabotaging my own shows at one point.
Just to check this, if you're in Stratford now, you're 3 years in, you've got a solid show. Why go to New Zealand and Australia? Why, if you're just doing
only for the winter?
And you've got a reliable income, why go?
Well, I had the desire to travel. That was always an issue with me. I always wanted to go everywhere. And secondly, I don't like winter, and I don't care. Whilst I have busted very cold days, I'd rather go and busk in Australia or New Zealand or California than try and busk in. I mean, Covent Garden's more workable in the winter than Stratford. Stratford's a river valley, and it's just a cold, windy hole in the winter. It's not pleasant. You get the odd day where it's good, but it's not reliable enough. Plus, I was young, and we didn't have kids. I could go to New Zealand, go to Australia, not see the winter for 3 months. It was a no-brainer for me.
What was the experience like?
Of what? Traveling?
Taking your work and putting it in a different... Yeah, well, not necessarily just traveling in it itself, but taking your work that you've developed here in the UK and then to apply it into New Zealand or Australia.
I never had a problem with it. Or even America, I found it all the same, really, in that sense. I had more of a problem when I took it to places like Germany and Austria and Holland, and then it's difficult then, because you suddenly realise that you're rambling away like an idiot. You don't speak that clearly anyway. Even English people can't keep up with me or understand, because it all goes a bit blah, 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 blah. And so in Austria and Germany, they're like, huh? So you have to learn to slow it down in those environments, so that takes a while. But I didn't have a problem with working Australia or New Zealand. I enjoyed both of them. I had good audiences in both. I was aware of the difference that, Aussies are quite harsh and they're quite curt, and they've got a certain sort of macho, sexist quality that you've got to admire, really, haven't you? Because we've given it all up with walkovers now. But I just like the Australian sense of humour.
And so did you find yourself playing with that? So you end up leaning into that more when you work in Australia?
No, I just think I became a sexist, misogynistic bastard like the rest of them. I couldn't help it, because I was like, hey.
You felt yourself liberated?
Yeah. Get yourself a beer, Gary. Tell your wife there's a Coke in the fridge. It's all like that, isn't it? It's sort of go out the back and do the washing.
So did you start doing that every year? So you developed this yearly cycle: Stratford in the summer, New Zealand, Australia.
Yeah, sometimes we just went. Sometimes we just went to Thailand or somewhere, or somewhere else, and just did nothing. Traveled through Indonesia and stuff, and I always did. I remember doing little magic shows. I did a little magic show in Egypt once, and I did one in Malaysia, just not for money, because I felt that would be a bit unfair, but just because I was waiting for a bus or something, and I thought, oh well, show a bit of magic. And people were very nice. They bought me drinks and dinner. I did it in Israel, so that was all good.
Why did you choose to learn magic then? Because straitjacket, the electronic release with the bucket in your head, all this stuff is kind of the verge of magic, but it's not. It's not spending the hours you must have spent to get good at doing that. That's a quite limited task.
I think they're very separate things for me. I think I was really lucky. Starting with Noel's Bucket of Water show was the right way to start for me, even though it was slightly annoying for Noel, because I'm naturally kind of playful and I just go with the flow, and I'm not really, I'm not too bothered about structure, and I don't care where it goes. And that was a good learning to learn to do a show without anything really that amazing, just being funny, but you really only got a thumb tip and a bucket, it's quite a good thing to do, I think. But magic was something else. I'd become quite fascinated with coins, probably even before. It's very hard to remember as you get old, but I think I was doing stuff with coins even before I was doing the street, and even before I was doing pavement drawing. I wasn't doing coin vanishes. I didn't know what they were, but I was rolling the thing around my fingers and stuff. And then I think I did learn a French drop at some point, but nothing. Didn't do any of it well. But then as I started to travel around the world doing street performing, I realized that there's quite a lot of time in which there is nothing to do. You've just worked Saturday and Sunday somewhere, and now everyone's like chilling out on the beach, and that doesn't really work for me. So if I got a deck of cards or some coins, I've got something to do. And they became like worry beads in a sense. I could sit, magic's a great thing to learn because you can be stuck in a queue because your plane's knackered or something and it's not going for 3 hours, but you're not bothered because you're learning something. So they became quite separate things, and I got quite good at it just by the amount of time I put in rather than by any real ability at it. So, and then I think, how did I get into a magic as a show? I think little tricks started to creep in, like a coin vanish in the ear and stuff with a kid. That started to happen at the first part of the show. And there was a bad period at one point where my show had a definite split in the middle, really, where it started off a bit magic-y and then went slapsticky, and they didn't really gel. In fact, the crowd would walk after the magic-y bit, and then I'd rebuild the crowd and do the straitjacket. And that's when I thought, well, I've got to do a little separate show that's like a table show or something. And at that point, I hadn't met Gazzo. I had met Nick Nicholas, but I bumped into him, and he was doing the cups and balls. He stole that from Gazzo and cleared off to New Zealand with it. And I thought, well, that's all right. I'll steal that from you. And I couldn't do it, though, was the problem. It involved more magic than I could do at the time. So I practiced a lot. I then went into Devonport when I got back to England, because Nick was doing it in New Zealand, and I was there living at his place, and he taught me a few bits. But
and what sort of year is this?
Oh, it's 86 or 7 by now, I think. Something like that. 88, 89.
So
89, maybe.
You living there in the winter? You're going over there in the winter and staying over there?
Yeah, and I'm staying in Nick's pad and we're having a laugh, and other acts are coming over, like Butterfly Man was there one year. But the years all get muddled up in my head because I've been there so many times, and to get the chronology right, it's quite difficult as you get older. But I started doing the cuts, and I couldn't do very well. I was down in Devonport, so I went down to Devonport to get a set of cuts, the magic, Charing Cross. And they had the little El Duco brass ones, which are tiny and not really very good, but they were about 70 quid, so I bought them. But Dave Brown, who used to work in Devonport and was also a street performer before your time, he, bless him, taught me the cuts one day and gave me a little pamphlet on it and stuff. So I came back to Loughborough, where I lived at the time, and practiced it. And
so, just very quickly, for people who don't know, the cups. What is the cups?
It's cups and balls. It's 3 cups. I haven't got any there. All my magic stuff's packed. But it's 3 cups. Usually copper, but to be honest, 3 plastic beakers work. There's no secret in that. That's another story. But why people spend so much money on hand-spun copper cups that I've made is slightly beyond me, because I'm the only person who works with a set of cups that really I don't even have a set of my own cups, which is kind of odd. I got leather ones I made because they're lighter and they're warmer on your hands, because copper cups are horrible in the winter. But it's 3 cups, 3 balls, and they vanish and appear and vanish and appear, and then a small vegetable shop appears at the end, or whatever you want your final loads to be, and usually a big load under the hat as well, like a melon or something. Which is Nick was doing.
Yeah, and so you're learning this then?
Yeah, I learned it pretty well. And for a while there, I'm back here doing it at Stratford. And I'm doing like a couple of magic shows in Stratford. And then I'm waiting to the afternoon and doing one straitjacket show. And then I'd wait around till the crowd till most of the acts had finished or gone, and I'd knock out another couple of magic shows. And it was a way of increasing the money. And I started to enjoy the magic shows because they were a bit less effort, to be honest with you. They were shorter, for one thing, and involved less running around like an idiot. So they became sort of a feature. I still wasn't great at it, but I was doing good money at it. And I wasn't working in quite the same way as Nick or Gazzo because I hadn't really watched Nick that well, and I didn't have a pouch at the front. I had a little pouch at the back for loading, but then I could do that because I had only little cups at the time, the old Duco cups. So they would only take sort of little lemons or big limes. So there wasn't really any need to have a pouch at the front. And that was fine. And I kept doing that. And then I heard that there was Pete Waddell. I heard there was another cup worker in London. He started about a year or two, or several years after me. And he got all worried because he heard, because by now I'd met Gazzo, and he was worried that, that it was Gazzo's show, which of course it was. But then I met Pete and we were fine. So that was how I got to do Gazzo's show. Was I actually bought it off him at one point because he was down on his luck and I'd been doing really well. And we were in New Zealand and I was already doing the cups anyway. But I think I gave him a couple of grand to actually, I said, I want to do your show word for word. He went, all right then. And so I bought it. And I thought, well, I'll do that. That's sorted. It didn't really work for me as well as it does for Gazzo, to be honest, because I don't have that innate nastiness. I can't get away with it. So
he's got a cheeky meanness to him, doesn't he?
He has, yeah, and it's kind of didn't really work for me. But having said that, I went and did the Guernsey Street Performer International Festival with a bunch of people, and I won it on the cups. So I got my money back basically a few months later. I was like, thanks, Gazzo. But then it changed. Then I got bored with it, and I got rid of a cup. I thought, why you have 3 cups? It's just if I get rid of 1 cup, I save a third of the weight because I get rid of the loads, and the thing's simpler. Nowadays, I don't really have a cup, so it's got even simpler. But there was a flaw for me in the table. I don't like the table. The table is a curse for me as a performer. I actually loathe working behind a table. It's not the way because why? I think I am autistic in a sense. And if there's a table, I just look at the table and I forget there's an audience. That happens a bit. Whereas with no table, I'll play the crowd and I'm more with them. With a table, I'm like down here going, I'm doing this now. So why have you developed into doing a show that's based around a table? Cups and Balls, because Gazzo form is based around a table. Yes, it is, but I was aware of the fact that you could work it in smaller side pitches and stuff, and that appealed to me. And evenings in little alleyways and stuff, so you could knock out something. And the great thing, I mean, a hype show's great and pays well, but you can't always do it. It's not always there. And there's often a big queue of people waiting to do it. And I'm like, oh, if I could just go and work that little bit over there and do something. So that was the appeal. And it took me a long time it's only recently in the last few years, I think I had a big midlife crisis, that I've got rid of the table, really. I don't really bother with a table now. in fact, I've got rid of the cups. I've got the 3 balls, but I just do something with my hands up here and talk to them. And it works better for me. I get the same money doing something here than I do having it. Because to me, the focus goes down to the table, and it's some people are great at it, like Gazzo, they can pull it off. But
so how did you come to the point of making all these props then? Because you made cups for a long, long time, if I'm right. Your cups are still have high price in auction. So I had a look before we did the interview. Yeah,
some of them have gone. I mean, there are some cups out there that cost that cost thousands of pounds a set because they're actually made out of silver and they're hallmarked and they weigh 2 kilos a set. 2 kilos of silver is going to set you back. But I got the silver when silver was cheaper. I made them a while ago. I gave Noel a set of silver Gazzos. I mean, he's got a massive set of silver cups. So they've become highly collectible because I think there's only 12 sets of silver cups, all numbered and whatnot. I think there's like 3 Gazzo sets, 3 animal size, because my size is smaller than Gazzo's. I never liked the really big cup. And then I made the little tiny cups for Nick, really. The love cups were designed to take a tennis ball, and Nick does tennis balls. So And there were a few other designs. But the copper cups, I think the reason my cups took off was when I started making big cups, nobody was really doing it. RNT2 weren't doing it. All the cups you could get from the Magic suppliers were quite little. They weren't really street cups. Paul Fox cups were big, but they were collector's items made a long time ago and way too expensive for the average performer and nigh impossible to get hold of. And so I just kind of talked to Gazzo and thought, well, you know, it can't be that hard. We'll make them. So I found a spinner up in Sheffield who could spin metal, and he taught me how to spin metal. And that's how I started. And I think the reason my cups took off is we had a very funny, Gazzo and I had a funny website called magicpitch.com where we basically took the piss out of Americans and sold them cups. And that worked very well. But my cups, see, if you look at RNT cups, they're perfect. They hand spin them, but then they put the bumps in, you know, the little bumps on the side to make them stack. They press those in a swaging wheel after the cup's made. I didn't like that. I always hand-made the beads as I was spinning the cup, which is much more difficult, but it means that there's a slight variation. It also means the bead isn't a perfect half round. It's got a flat top edge to it sometimes, and, you know, you could vary it a bit depending on the design. It was more likely to go wrong, but it
looks like they're old and beaten, right?
Well, they look handmade. You can see subtle differences in them. I also use thick copper, so they had a kind of certain appeal, and people seemed to love them, and it quickly became a thing that my cups were good. I don't know
why. Did you start making them? Why did you decide to start making them? Was it a hole in the market? I can make some money here.
No, I think it was just because I wanted a bigger set of cups and was having trouble finding a set. I think this is like the story of my life. It's like, oh, that's a better table than me. I'll go and make a table, and then I'm always making stuff. I've made so many things. I've made so many things that have failed as well, like various. I've done the mini me thing that didn't work, and I made a wizard costume.
What's the mini me thing?
It's my head, little body, my hands doing magic, and a couple of little feet and stuff. It wasn't me. I took it out for a day. My wife ended up doing it rather than me. I did it for like 10 minutes and went, I feel like a twat doing this. It just isn't me. I can't do a statue. I can't stay still. I tried doing a wizard. I thought, well, I'll sit on Henley Street and just do close-up magic with some tinkly music, and I'll make a wizard costume. First wizard costume was horrible. Made another one, didn't I? Which is much more tie-dye. Looked great. Still wasn't me. Went out, did an hour, and went, just feel like a twat again. It just wasn't me. So, and then I spent like 6 months making a leather. I've got it somewhere. I should have dug it out. You could have seen it. I got a leather doublet thing. So I thought, well, I'm in Shakespeare's Town. I'll make one of those leather doublets with the hangy bits around the belt.
What's a doublet? It's
like a leather waistcoat with shoulders and a little skirty bit of flaps and stuff that the men wore in the 15th century. And I made it, and it cost me like a fortune to make it in good quality leather. I had to have the best leather. It took me like 6 months to sew it. And I remember Gazzo going, "Oh, do you wear your new medieval costume?" I went, "Yeah, I hid in a bush." I literally did. I felt so self-conscious in it. I sort of went, oh, just wasted another 3 months. I'm not very good at uniform. Oh, there it is. Yeah, look. Here's a doublet. I'll put this down. You can see it. It's very well made. It's leather. If I stand back a bit, you'll see it. It has come in handy. I'll just take the headphones off and quickly put it on.
Never expected to get a fashion show.
It did fit back then. So that's it. And I'm back now. But I mean, obviously, it looked bigger when I.
So it sounds like you're going to wear this more now than you did on the day.
It's come in handy for a couple of those kind of medieval gigs you get and medieval banquets and stuff. It's paid for itself, so that's not being an issue. But as a street performing thing, you just feel self-conscious in it. Or I do. I get that some people look good and don't mind a costume. I've never been very good at costume. For me, a costume is a shirt, a waistcoat, and a hat to collect the money in, and I'm done. That's any more than that. I don't like that thing again. It's down to minimalism. I don't want to have to carry a costume plus the stuff I normally wear. Like, I get annoyed by having stuff with me. Like if I could have a chip instead of a bank card and just do that, I would do that. And if I could have the phone built into my brain with a little, I don't know how it would work, but I'm sure they'll get there. That would suit me. I don't want to have to carry a phone particularly. I don't wear watches. I don't like rings. I don't like anything very much that I have to bother with. I am a minimalist at heart, although I now live in my studio. There's a big painting. Look, there's another one up there and another one over there. But yeah,
so, Andy, you've got to this point. You're making cups, you're doing magic
Gary.
shows. And Andy, sorry, Gary. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry,
Gary.
No one cares.
Yeah. Nobody. So, Gary, you're doing shows. You're making cups. You're friends with the guy who's created the show that is now the most predominant show in the world, probably, for magic shows.
Gazzo show, yeah.
Where do we go from here? Now, yeah, well, I'd say Gazzo is probably the most influential street magician of our era, of our age, just because
it's just my fat
the
friend.
Amount of people who use his show, his work, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Gazzo sometimes used to get quite upset about people doing his stuff and doing his lines and doing his show. But my view is very logical. You can't have it both ways. If you market the stuff like we did on Magic Pitch and then sell it as a DVD and then sell the cups and the pouches, I mean, Gazzo's made hundreds of pouches. You can't expect people not to use them if they're buying them to do your show. Why else? It doesn't make sense to me to sell it and then worry about that. I do think, from the perspective of the seat of the street, though, that it's not the healthiest thing. Everybody doing the same show, and it can get very boring. And you know, I'm guilty of it as guilty of it as the next person, but I think the street had its sort of golden years where there was a bit more originality, and then I think certainly in magic it all became like, some people think the only thing you can do on the street is the cups and balls, and really, I know it's a great trick, but you can do any trick. I've finished on a rope trick before and got the same money. It doesn't really matter. It's just in people's heads that it has to be, because Gazzo was at the top and that's the top show, and therefore that's what you have to emulate. You have to do it that way. You have to do the same kind of obnoxious jokes, and you have to produce 6 fruits because he does 6 fruits, and you don't have to, you know. Tom Picard used to make well, I don't know if he made a living, but he had 1 cup and 1 fruit. And I always liked Tom Picard. He's an old American. He's like the most miserable person you'll ever meet. I don't know if you ever met him, but he's never happy. He's funny without knowing he's funny. I mean, he once shared a pitch with Nix, and it was just the 2 of them back to back at Edinburgh doing magic table shows. And Tom Picard said to him at the end of the 3rd day, "Why have I always got to follow you? Why don't you follow me?" And Nick went, "There's 2 of us. We're back to back. What are you talking about?"
Well, we're following each other.
Yeah, yes, we can first then. But I always liked Tom Picard because he had a very minimal show. It involved a little bit of that cigarette manipulation stuff. It's like Slidini Silks, which is a great trick, and he used to finish on a 1 cup routine, chop cup. And I actually think, from the audience's point of view, I think a lot of magicians can get easily confused by what's entertaining and what's not. And Gazzo's entertaining when he does the cups, but it's not because he's doing the cups. It's because he's very good at delivering 1,000,000 lines and 1,000,000 jokes. And although he can't, remember anything very much in life, he never seems to forget a joke. He's like the opposite.
It's going to make sense as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's very much him.
Yeah,
it's him. It's very much him. He is a bit of a bastard in real life, and so he can do those lines because he has got that edgy quality to him. Whereas if you're slightly effeminate, sort of mincy and stuff, it don't come out right when you try it. It's like, I've just been nasty, haven't I? Sorry. You can't do it. It's like you find yourself apologising for lines that you shouldn't have done in the first place. But people think that they go, "Oh, I've got to do the Gazzo show. I've got to have 6 oranges because he has 6 oranges, and I've got to have a melon that's going to do my back in." But you don't. People are watching Gazzo because of the way he delivers lines and how many jokes there are. They actually Most people watching them, if you ask them afterwards, would say, I haven't got a clue what's going on with the trick. I wasn't really watching. That's what happens. Like, the stuff appeared at the end and that was all great, but I couldn't have told you what cup the ball was under. But you see other magicians going, and is the ball under this cup or this cup or this? And the audience like, I don't care. I don't care where the ball is. You know, because they're kind of expecting you to follow the trick, whereas Gazzo's not expecting that. He's just talking and doing jokes and happens to be doing a trick. And it works for him.
But isn't this thing, you get it with jugglers, where jugglers, they believe, some people believe that when an audience is watching you, they're watching you like they're watching an athletic event, and they want to see you do the physical thing. But in reality, that audience, they never, from my experience, watch you to see an athletic feat. They watch you to be entertained.
Yeah, they don't care. You know, and some magicians, they go, oh, you don't even do a proper pass, Gary. I'm going, they don't care. They just want they want the signed card back at the end of the show in the orange. That's all they want. They don't care how it got there, how technically good I am. If I can do it during a moment of ad lib when everybody's looking somewhere else, fine. Don't have to do a pass. It's kind of, you know, the technical side of it shouldn't really matter. It can be great, you know, when you see a really nice coin worker and stuff, it can be wonderful, but probably only to magicians, probably not to the general public. I mean, magicians do this thing, they go, oh, you can't do that vanish, it's not natural. And you go, well, none of it's natural, is it? If you really vanish a coin, you would just hold it up like that and go, look, it's going to vanish. You wouldn't actually put it somewhere else to make it vanish, would you?
No.
Oh,
and also, as well, people forget this thing that sometimes you watch and you don't have a problem with watching it because you're enjoying it. Tommy Cooper, bugging up every trick he did near enough.
Well, it's always more fun, isn't it?
People loved it because they were part of the thing. Yeah.
Well,
so I was told by a friend, a whisper on the wind, about asking you a couple of things. First of all, about the time you spent in the flat with Gaz, I was told to ask you about. And I think we talked about that and touched on that a little bit. And the other one was a flat in San Francisco. Yeah,
the San Francisco story isn't with Gazzo. And it's a strange story. But that's pavement drawing years, that one.
Okay.
And Deb and I decided we're going off around the world for a year. And it's 1987, I think, or something like that, or 86, or I can't remember what it was. But anyway, and I think at this stage I'm learning magic, and I'm sort of half and half. But we decide we'll just fund it by whatever. We'll pick fruit. We'll do pavement drawing. We'll work our way around the world. And so we get a round the world air ticket. And I think we got married. I think so. Or was it before we got married? I don't remember. But anyway, we went. The first stop was San Francisco, which was a shock for me because I at the time I was very terrified of flying. I was a pain in the ass to be with. I think my wife nearly killed herself rather than face the rest of the flight because I'm all doom and gloom. I'm convinced the plane's going to crash. It's a 747 and it's Continental Airways and it looks like shit. Who the hell paints the 747 sort of turd brown? 2 variations of turd brown. That's not. I don't want to get on the thing. I'm like, that's going to crash, isn't it? It's like I want the silver shiny one. Looks newer. So I'm like, gin and tonics, getting horrendously drunk. Because I was really bad. I'd been in a plane, a Boeing 707, funny enough, which is, I mean, I think they stopped flying before you were born. But they were the original jets. They were faster than modern jets. They were pure jets. They weren't turbo fans. They were just jets. Lots of black smoke out the back and just power. We was in a nosedive in one of those, but flying from Tel Aviv to London, and we made an emergency landing in Athens, and I hitchhiked home and didn't get on a plane for 3 years. I was like, I'm doing that again. That's just a waste of time, isn't it? It's just, and it's funny because I was traveling with a friend at the time, and we'd been on a kibbutz for months, and we're on this 707, and they'd serve breakfast, and it's like bacon and eggs. And we haven't had bacon because we've been in Israel. There was no bacon on our kibbutz, and bacon and eggs. And then this plane, because of oxygen and stuff, it makes a dive. And so some people are getting hurt because they're not strapped in and they've bounced around a bit. I'm strapped in because I'm a panicker. Gwyn's strapped in. I'm on the way down, the thing's rattling and bumping around like it's going to fall apart. I didn't believe airplanes could shake that much and stay in one piece. And it goes on this dive for about a minute to get down to a lower altitude. It's really an uncomfortable, bouncy thing. And all Gwyn's worried about, my mate, is he's worried about his breakfast. And like halfway through this, he's going, "Are you going to eat your bacon?" And I'm like, "I'm about to die." Gives a shit about the bacon. But he was like, "Oh no, it's just diving." I'm like, "Well, they don't do that. They don't dive. It's not a fighter plane." Anyway, we landed at Athens, and I wasn't having any more of it. I thought, that's that. And then I was going to write a book at that stage. I was going to write a book, and I still plan to write it. It's called, I got the title, and I've written a few first pages, but I never get much further than that. It's called Spot the Bastard Aeroplane. It was all based on, and I've collected air crashes. I knew every air crash that ever happened by now. I was really into them. But anyway.
So this is something which had scored into your consciousness quite a lot then.
Yeah, no,
experience.
I went from being terrified of flying to actually almost becoming erotically turned on by plane crashes. They became a thing. I was like, "Oh, another one." When the Twin Towers went down, I was like, "God, this is a good day." I couldn't write them down quick enough because I was collecting plane crashes. I was like, they're like, "Oh, my wife is going, 5,000 people are dead." I'm going, "Well, yeah, 3 planes in one day, be fair." When's that ever happened? Shame 2 of them are the same model. They could have, shared it out a bit and got an Airbus in there. But, so we were on the way to San Francisco. And we land there about 12 o'clock at night. And we're young and we're green. And we got to find somewhere to live. And we're in the Tenderloins, which is the rough area. And we go to this, hostel. It's not a youth hostel. It's some dive. The whole thing smells a bit wee and spunky, to be honest. It doesn't smell too good. And there's a guy interviewing everybody before, I've been on the plane for hours. Lucky I'm alive. The thing made it, and he's doing this long speech of to the person in front of me. He was like Huggy Bear off of Starsky and Hutch, again before your time, and he'd go, "Yeah, so I'll go through the rules, man, and no drugs," and he'd just go on and on and on for 10 minutes with the person in front. And they get their key and they go to their room. Next person in front, "Yeah, so," and I'm like, "We've heard it all already." But I got to go, and he goes through it with everybody. So it's like an hour to get into this flea pick. And the next day we're wandering around and we go to what was Dashiell Hammett's bar, the guy who wrote lots of detective novels like The Maltese Falcon. It was Dashiell Hammett's bar on 110 Powell Street, which was also a big high-rise hotel, all owned by the same people. And we got pissed there, basically, got absolutely pissed. And started chatting and mentioned payment drawing and showed some photographs. We didn't have digital cameras in those days or phones or anything. And they went, "Great, why don't you do a drawing?" I've unplugged my laptop. I've got to plug it back in again. It'll die. Oh. No, it's all right. Don't worry. It's just, so we agreed to do in a few days' time, we agree that we're going to do this pavement drawing outside this bar. And they said, "What are you going to draw?" We said, "We'll do Laurel and Hardy." It's we'll put some little naff comment at the bottom. If you don't think we're worth a donation, why not go in the bar, have a drink and think about it, or something to advertise the bar. And we turn up about 7 a.m. on a Friday or Saturday, I can't remember. And within seconds of starting, or minutes, we're pinned against the wall by policemen and police cars there, and they're not having it. And then this woman comes out, young, quite pretty, probably older than me, but yeah, I was young then and she was young. And she's like, "I own this hotel. This is our sidewalk. We actually own the sidewalk, and we've asked them to do it." And they're like, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." And they clear off and let us payment draw. And I'm like, "Ooh, fair enough." So we payment draw, and we do really well. We make quite a lot of money, all in dollars. It's a lot of money by the end of the day. I don't know what it is. And we're covered in chalk, head to foot. We look like chimney sweeps. And then she comes down and she says, "Well, look, giving you a hotel for the night. Is the keys." And I'm like, "Oh." And she goes, "It's the penthouse suite," which at the time was like the equivalent of several £1,000s a night today. It's got a garden and everything right at the top of this tower thing. And there's like a bottle of champagne in the room. And the guy who we'd been talking to at the bar, I can't remember his name, shame really. He gave me a gram of cocaine. Now, I'd never had cocaine. Not really, being a hypochondriac, I'm not good with drugs. I don't even drink a lot because I get liver failure after 2 beers. But I thought, well, we're here now, so we went and had a shower, and it's sort of a honeymoon, really, because I think we got married just before we went. Yeah, we did get married just before we went. And so we shared the cocaine, and Debbie decides that she wants to go find a jazz bar. And it's like midnight. And so I'm like, I'm not going out. It's not safe. So she goes wandering off, completely off her trolley, to find a jazz bar. I start watching porno movies on the TV in my room. And I'm like, wait, this is good. And I don't know if you've ever had cocaine, but there's no way you can masturbate and finish it when you're on cocaine. It just goes on forever. You just wear it away. But it ended up with me in the garden, naked, masturbating on the top of a skyscraper with all these other skyscrapers around me and all the lights on. I'm like, well, this is a weird day. So, San Francisco. Yeah, we left San Francisco quite quickly after that. But that's the San Francisco.
It sounds like you had a good time.
Yeah.
So when we come to our contemporary point in the story so far, I think we're at a point where you're doing magic more than you're doing the circle, actually making the cups. How do we move on from there? Because you're not at that place now, so obviously there's been some change in your life from then.
Well, I kept doing the circle show up until about 8 years ago, and then I realised I couldn't do it anymore. I just wasn't happening for me. I don't know why. We moved to New Zealand for 5 years, and I was doing well there with it, and then I just kind of started to dislike it in quite a big way, really. I think part of me couldn't ad-lib as well as I used to when I was younger. Part of me couldn't be bothered to, and I felt like I was going through the motions a bit. So I just sort of cut the big show out about 8 years ago and decided to concentrate on just table shows or just little magic shows, stuff like that. Because I was older, it was easier. I could do smaller shows, probably enjoy them. That was the plan. I don't think I did. But in my head, they would be more enjoyable. And I quit the big show. So there were times in that 8 years where I went and did one just because I felt like it. But on the whole, it wasn't really ever there again. It was never going to reach the heights that it met before. It was kind of a sad reflection of itself. It's like I'd given up. And so I was smart enough to not do it. And then it became a big midlife crisis because even the table started to get a bit sad, and I was starting to struggle with that. And in fact, about 4 years ago, I went off with Gazza. We went touring off on his motorhome around Europe. And I was kind of losing the plot a bit. I was like, I just don't want to do this. And I remember I did a show in Amsterdam. He goes, well, you're doing a good job. Why don't you? I said, I don't know. I feel like I'm doing the same. It feels like Groundhog Day. It feels like I'm not getting any fun out of it. It's not about the money with me. Gazza, we're very different in that. Gazzo could sit and work 9 a.m. till 9 p.m, doing show after show after show and have the best day of his life. He just loves doing it. And he loves everybody laughing, and that's enough for him. But for me, myself, I don't really care what the audience is doing. I don't care if they die afterwards. I'm really not bothered. I mean, it's better if they have a good time because they'll pay me. But for me, I want to enjoy it myself, and I wasn't.
Okay. And so, what did you think to do about that?
Well, I just carried on and looked like an embarrassment. I think is what happened for quite a few years, and it's probably still going on. Oddly, now that I've found something else to do,
but you stopped. Yeah, but you stopped the cups as well. You stopped.
I had enough
selling the cups.
Yeah,
if I'm correct.
Yeah, I mean, I keep giving gigs away. I kept cutting my hand badly. Metal spinning's not. It's for real men. It's for people that are like warriors. It's a lot of physical effort leaning against a spinning piece of copper and trying to bend it. And the damn thing's sharp, and you're trimming it, and the bits are coming off. And if you lose concentration for a second, and your finger's gone. And I had some really nasty cuts, including nearly putting a piece of metal through my head. And I was like, oh, God, I've had enough of this. So I stopped because it's hard work. And it was never really, they became a thing. I sold the rights to them in the end to RNT2, so I got paid for stopping. They bought them off me, and I got paid quite well. So So I agreed never to make cups for 5 years. That 5 years is up now. So technically I could make the cups again if I wanted to, but I don't want to. I'm quite happy not to.
And so did you intentionally kind of give stuff up and slowly phase into being a painter, or was it incidental? Or
I started painting again a couple of years ago when I realized that because I've got a child and she's 16, and about 5 years ago, I guess, I started painting, and I wasn't great at it. I'd lost a lot and forgotten a lot. And I was having to reteach myself to paint and draw because I basically had 30 years off. And I realized I wasn't going away anymore. I wasn't going to Australia for the winter because I got a child. And I didn't really want to. I'd done all that. And the circuit didn't seem to be as much fun as it used to be. The money doesn't seem to be as good as it used to be. I'm certainly not as good as I used to be. And I thought, well, I'll paint. And that will get me through the winter. And then in summer, I'd stop painting and I'd go out and do shows. And I did that for a few years. And that would have been the plan, I think, this year a bit. I would be out there doing something because oddly, if I don't have to do it all the time for a living, I think I can enjoy it again. Just before lockdown started, I went and did a gig, a wedding, and I had a great time. I was ad-libbing and funny. And I was like, oh, I love that. But if I was doing it 4 nights a week, I'd be going like, oh, Christ. So there's an element of that. Now, my ideal world would be 3 gigs a month and 2 days busking a month and 5 days painting, and that's it. So that would be fine for me.
And do you feel happy in the place you're in now, or at least contented in the place you're in, painting and doing little bits here and there?
I don't know if I'm ever in my entire life been happy. I wouldn't know. I have to define that. I think I'm quite mad some of the times. I think I'm seriously up and down. I've always been. I mean, I take Prozac, so that's how up and down I am. And without it, I'm not like the most depressing person in the world. I live in the future. If I didn't take a little pill every day, I would be somewhere else right now. I'd be on tomorrow or the day after. And I would have conversations in my head with the people I was going to meet tomorrow. Like without the pill, I would be, if I was visiting the doctor on Wednesday, I would have the conversation with the doctor maybe 1,000 times before I saw the doctor. And then I'd go and see the doctor and have a completely different conversation to the 1,000 I'd already planned. And I'd realize that I just wasted 3 days having a fictitious conversation with my doctor. Whereas if I take that pill, I'm in the moment and I am definitely happier. It stops me.
That's very interesting.
Well, it's an anxiety thing. I think I second guess the future a lot to an extent that it wears me out and my head crashes. I instead of enjoying the moment. And I think painting is about having something to do and I find it quite relaxing. I can put the worst music on in the world and have quite a good time painting in little bursts. So that is very good for me therapy-wise. I think shows were about recognition. I think I have a very low opinion of myself. I think my whole family does, actually. I think it seems to be a trait. Not my family that I'm married to, but, my mum, my dad, my brother. None of us have any confidence. We all feel fairly worthless. Not as worthless as most of you lot, but because let's face it, street performers, they are fairly worthless. They're right down there. But I've always had a very low opinion of humankind and myself. I think this is the best the universe can muster. I mean, the thing's infinite. And this is the best it can do. We're stuffed. I don't really feel that good about myself. Never have. I'm never happy. I always think my painting's a shit. I always think my show's shit. I always think everything I do is never quite right. It never lives up to my internal expectation of what I'm aiming for, which is why, I'll do a painting and Deb will go, "That's great. That's the best painting you've ever done." And it took you 4 hours, and I'll ruin it by the next day because I want more detail in it, and I want to know every single bit of the painting. I want to know that everything makes sense no matter how far I zoom in, and of course it doesn't. Even the universe doesn't make sense if you zoom in. But to me, I kind of I'll show you. I just painted Pip today. You probably can't see it very well, but I've shone a light on it. I just started painting Pip. I've done her arm, I'm working on the head. She's in the red and the blue thing. Can you see it?
Not quite. I think we can see a waistcoat, orange waistcoat there.
Oh no, it's that way more.
Just out on the right.
Yeah.
Yes,
well, I started working on her head and her arm and her body, but I've even painted her earrings. Now her head's only 20. It's only 2 centimeters tall. Her head, so it's really tiny.
Wow.
So the earring is a couple of mil. And really, most artists wouldn't bother. They would just go, well, just put a splodge there because who can tell that's an earring from 3 feet away? And when you come back here and you sit down, you can't tell it's an earring. You can't even see the earring. You can barely see her head. So why am I doing it? And the answer is I haven't got a clue. But I have to know that if she was wearing earrings, I can see the earrings. It's as simple as that. It's autism, let's be honest.
Well, possibly. Do you find that these qualities that you have in yourself have been, well, I think they have, listen to you, but I wonder what you think. Do you think these qualities have been helpful as an artist, as a performer, as a creator through your life? They've driven you to create, potentially.
I think I am quite creative. I get very bored with the same thing, and so I like new ideas. I'm always trying ideas on the street, and Gazzo, we're totally different. He'll stay with the same show for life. He's quite happy with that. And every time I come up with an idea, he goes, that won't work. Gazzo always says that, and he's right, it doesn't. But nothing, he's doing right every time, actually. I should listen to him and stop making shit. But I can't help it. I get an idea. I had an idea the other day for a giant rabbit that works on the street and pulls a little man out of the hat. Gazzo's like, why would you want to make that? And I'm like, well, because it was an idea. I had an idea for ventriloquism, and no one would let me do it. My wife wouldn't let me do it. She said it would be construed as racist, though it's not. And I said, well, I'll do a video of it then. And she said, well, you can't do that. You'll get death threats. And I'm like, it's not a bad idea. I'm not having a go at A, it's not a race anyway. It's a religion. B, I don't think it's offensive. I'm just making I had this idea I always wanted to be a ventriloquist. That was one of the things I thought I'd do. And I'd learn, teeter, tighter, tick, tickle, pepper. I can't do it very well. And also, I don't like the puppet getting because, if you watch the puppet it's all about the puppet. You're just some sap holding a puppet, and I'm like, I'll burn you later. So I don't like the puppet getting the attention, but I've always liked ventriloquism. I've always loved it. Even when it's done, in fact, the bad ventriloquists are usually the best. But my idea was a woman in a full burqa doing ventriloquism because you couldn't see her lips move. And then if she wasn't very good at operating the puppet, she could have the puppet in a burqa. So you basically have 2 burqas going. Oh.
That's really funny. That's really quite funny.
So I thought it was funny. I don't think it's
racist because in my not entirely informed opinion, but still nonetheless, is that the joke isn't anything horrible or mean.
No, and it's not really about. It's really about me not being able to do ventriloquism, and that solves the problem. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my other idea was to make a little tramp puppet because I did make a few puppets, marionettes. Because I watched JP do it up in Edinburgh, and I thought, oh, well, I'll have a go at that. Pops was making puppets. Gazzo went and bought a puppet. And we're all getting older. We thought we'll all dangle puppets and we'll make a living doing that way. Now we can't do shows. No one told us you're back at us after 10 minutes and you haven't got a clue how to work a puppet, and that it's actually really difficult to make the puppet look anything other than a bit of wood. But that's not the point. I had this idea to make a tramp puppet and sell the little issue. And I was going to actually make little issues instead of the big issue. And I was going to stand, because I'm a bit... Like that. Yeah, and I was going to stand next to people selling the big issue and go, little issue, write some puppets. But the idea is better than it's not worth the effort doing it. That's often the case. So,
well, it's not monetary. You're not doing it for money. You're not going to get all the cash in the world for making this fun little thing. But then it's a fun little thing. You've created something fun that wasn't in the world before, which has its own value in it, I would say.
I guess it does, but I like the ideas better than the execution sometimes, I think. And I waste too much time making stuff, way too much time. And I don't know why, really. I don't, I'm getting old now, and I don't like that either. I don't like the fact that my knees don't work. I don't understand why I have to. I mean, I'm not that bothered about dying. I've got to be honest. I was bothered about it when I was 20, but now it almost seems like like it might be a good idea. But I don't like being old. It's not very much fun, is it? I'm 60. That's 50 was better. 40 was better. 30 was better. 20 was horrendous, to be fair. Piss. So
you're saying kind of like this, and then now you're on this bit.
Yeah, but I'm not unhappy. That's the funny thing, because it's pleasurable to watch my daughter grow up, and she's 16, and she's full of beans and quite talented at stuff. So all that stuff's good. But just like when you get up in the morning, everything hurts. It takes like 3 cups of coffee before I can move. So that side of it I don't like. And I've got a part-time job. Well, I've got a part-time job now.
Okay, what are you doing?
I go to this house. I do 3 shifts a week of 8 hours because I'm no good at having time on my hand. And no one knows how this happened. I'm like the least unemployable person in the world. I never really had a job apart from that one where I was making templates, waiting for Deb to finish. And literally a couple of months before lockdown, I was like, I'm not going to get through this winter painting. I think it was about December time. I got like a couple of gigs booked in December, and I got the gig in Austria with Billy on New Year's Eve. And is the sound still working? Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you, buddy.
And so I decided to apply for jobs. I thought I'll get a part-time job because I've just got too much time, and I might appreciate my time more. So I applied to Morrison's to stack shelves. I had an interview there, and I applied to this other company, which I can't mention because we're not supposed to mention it, to basically a caring job, but looking after autistic people. I don't have to wash them and all that stuff because I can't do that. I can't even wash myself. But I basically take them out and cook them dinner and talk to them and chat and
play around.
Go for walks, take them for drives, go bowling. I mean, before the lockdown, we did all sorts of things. It was good fun. Now the lockdown has made it less exciting. And my wife said, you'll last about 3 days. I got offered both jobs. I got offered the shelf stacking job because I'm quite good at interviews. I'm funny. And I got offered the caring job. I'd already accepted the caring job. Otherwise, I'd have done the shelf stacking job because I thought I could just listen to music and stack shelves overnight. But anyway, I got the caring job. And like, here we are 5 months later and I'm still doing it. And I actually love it, which is the really weird thing. And I'm not that caring, so I don't really understand how it works. I do lack empathy for, but they're actually, I don't really see them. They're like me, really. They're like me. They're just the same, as far as I can tell. So it made me realise I probably am autistic. But yeah, it's a good laugh. I have a laugh, and I'm like, well, that's easy, isn't it? I just cook dinner, have something to eat, have a giggle, go for a drive, go for a walk. So I was going to quit it. I was thinking, like, I'll do that. And as soon as spring's here, I'll quit and go busking. But then, of course, lockdown happened. And I was like, I've got a job. I'm the only person I know who's got a job. So it's kind of weird. Like, everyone's, how come Gary's the only person working? He's the only person who never gets off the couch. So everyone's
You're going to go back to the street after?
I want to, yeah, but I want to do it in quite different ways now, really. I think I'm tired. I've got very upset by hype shows. They've started to all sound the same to me. And I'm not saying I was any better, but I think there was some element of originality when I'd ad lib and stuff. And I'm not saying people don't. There are still great shows out there, but there's an awful lot that just... It's like the Gazzo show. There's just too many same lines one after another, and I think the audience are wising up to it a bit. I think there's people are, I think it's Henry Normal, the writer, he wrote for the BBC, he wrote quite recently, if you laid all the street acts together end to end, would they be any funnier? And he was basically saying they're all doing the same lines, and I know those lines work, and I think one of the great sadnesses for me watching everybody I've admired over the years is the best acts make the least money. That seems to be a given in my world. My biggest earning shows, and I had huge hats at the height of it, were for probably my most generic worst shows. Where I've actually broke 3 of that and done something and had a laugh, I haven't got paid so well. And then when you look at people like Living Space, they don't get paid as well as three dangerous objects thing. So we all do it, but it's kind of, I think it's a curse of the street. I actually think those that gear themselves just towards a festival show have got the right idea, really, because I think you're freed up creatively the minute you haven't got to structure something towards getting the money. I don't care how good your act is. If you don't do hat lines, you won't get paid. It seems to be the case. And I got to the stage where I can't get the hat lines out anymore. I'm like, I can't say that anymore. And it's unfair, perhaps, to blame everybody else for doing it because they're younger and they're just doing what I did. And it's merely me that's become bitter and twisted and fed up with listening to it. But I watch some shows.
No, I have the same feeling. I have a big worry.
Yeah,
I have a feeling that Covent Garden's kind of, to some extent, on life support because we're not getting repeat people coming back. People aren't staying all day. People aren't coming for the culture. They're just coming for that one show, that little packaged experience, like McDonald's. Take that and then go.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter which show you see because they've all got the same jokes, they've all got the same lines, and whether they're juggling 3 sticks at the end of it or producing 3 oranges or doing something on a roller bowler or walking, it's exactly the same show. And I think if a bunch of intelligent aliens invaded and they watch street shows, because that's why they would travel across the universe, they would go, they were all the same. But they're not all the same.
They might say they're religious ceremonies. This is obviously
they all
must have been handed down. They're all doing it the same.
Yeah, it's just Morris dancing. I think it's kind of sad because I think that, there are some great acts out there and there have been some great and wonderful stuff on the street. And it still is. But it gets lost by that monotony of sameness. And I actually see, I hate it. I'm not going to mention names, obviously. But, I mean, sometimes I see a show and they strut around like they're a god. And their show is literally an hour's blag on money lines before they take off the straitjacket, and it's like so tedious. And they think and they get, and then they have the gall to go, "I'm a comedian" to the audience. I'm like, really? Well, say something funny. It's like, and sometimes it just sounds like you're begging if you go too hard on those money lines. I think what started as a little money line as a joke, like in the early days, there'd be 1 or 2 money lines, and they would be quite the funny ones. We all know what they are, so no point in repeating them. And 1 or 2 of them, it's quite nice at the end of a show if you've actually done something. But if you stand there for 20 minutes and just incessantly on about it, it's like, geez, give me a break.
Well, I'm not going to say too much. My hat line begins at the start of my show and finishes at the end. My entire show's a hat line, so I'm not going to say much.
Well, that might be, but that might be all right because there was an act in America once whose first half of the show was giving out dollar bills to the audience. And some people got $10 bills and $20 bills, and one person got a $100 bill. And the second half of the show was collecting it back in with a profit, which was one of the best shows in the world.
That's quite interesting. I love that. Do you know the guy's name?
No, I can't remember. He won a big contest in California with it. It was great.
But if the idea sphere, if anyone out there knows, please give me a private message. Let me know.
And I hammered the hat lines in my day, but I just got to a point where I can't get them. Now I've gone the other way. Now I punish myself by not doing enough hat lines, and I don't get paid. Now I'm like, there you go.
Well, do you know what I think the problem is here? At least one of the problems here maybe is that people aren't forming different characters. They're looking at work as if there's some form of character to that. And you can see, even chatting with you, Gary, that you've got a character. You have a character. When you go and perform there, you engage as that character. You don't go in there and go, right, I'm going to homogenize my personality.
I'm me.
Lines and work this crowd in front of me.
Well,
I think people aren't necessarily leaning into that character as much as they used to, maybe.
I mean, I do use stock lines, don't get me wrong, but I don't use them in a very structured way. Like some people will use the same line at the same point in every show. I might not use it one show, or it might just be apt at this show. And I like to use the lines. In fact, one of the things I started doing a while back was to get all the stock lines out the way as early as possible, so I couldn't use them again. So I'd have to think on my feet.
Bam, 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 bam.
Yeah.
So the thing in my head was going to be, and usually is, that it's because you have a personal criticism of the world, or a grudge, or a vendetta, or something that drives you to create a voice which is different from everyone else. I think a lot of people, when they don't create their own material or their own character, it's because they don't have a lot to say about the world.
Possibly, or they're in it
There's
purely for
nothing they're
money.
trying to address.
There's an awful lot just in it
Yeah.
because it's a living. They just go, well, I'll hack out 3 of those on a Saturday, 3 of those on a Sunday, and a couple in the week if it's busy enough, and I'm sorted. And I don't have to change it. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to get any better at it. But for me, that's not enough.
Yeah. Well, I've spoken to you, and you said repeatedly that I'm trying to minimize my work. I'm doing this just for money. I'm doing this here. I'm doing that. And you've not at any point in the conversation really said, well, I believe that people have to know this, and I should say this to these people. But you've always done more than you've needed to do. And I'm interested,
Yeah, I mean, when I'm lost in it, if I'm actually doing a show and doing well, there's a weird feeling, and I guess we've all felt it as performers. There's a weird feeling. Sometimes you're doing a show, and you're aware there's an audience, and you're aware you're doing a show. And it might be okay, it might be quite good, or it might be a bad one. It doesn't really matter. But it kind of, even, some people might come up and go, oh, that was great, Gary. And you just felt like, that was all right. Because it just felt like there was a detachment. But when it's really good, and it doesn't happen that often for me, not often enough, but it's happened, it's what kept me going, I guess. There's a time when I forget there's an audience. When it's not like an audience anymore. It might be 500 people, but it doesn't feel like 500 people. It feels like 3 mates down the pub and we're all a bit pissed and we're having a laugh. That's when it's that's really when it's great for me. There are 1 or 2 times when I've had that and I felt, well, it's probably more than 1 or 2. I don't know. It might be 100, but it's certainly a low percentage of shows, probably less than 1%, where I've just gotten into this amazing space where time, everything, it all just goes, and I'm ad-libbing away, having a good time. It's just like the best party on earth. But they're rare, but those are the moments that you kind of live for, really. I've had it on stage.
Is that when you feel like there's a synergy between you and the audience? Is that when the audience, they're bought into you, they understand you, they're there with you?
It's kind of like a one-off event. It's kind of like a moment in time that just all feels right. And it feels exactly like when I used to go off on one down the pub with a bunch of mates. It feels like I'm just having the time of my life. And I don't care what I'm talking about anymore. I don't care what trick I'm doing. I don't care if I finish the straight jacket or the cups or whatever. I'm just having a really good time. But they're very rare, but they're the few shows that I've really felt that, oh, this is worth trotting out another 100.
I don't think everybody. Well, you say every performer's had that experience. I don't think every performer gets those experiences much. I talk to some performers that have very steady, stable pieces of work that are constantly, they function. They don't fucking fail. They just always work. They always gather people. They always watch. They always enjoy. They always pay. But they never get to that moment that you're describing.
No, because they don't take enough chances. You see, you only get those moments when you're off script. I think that feeling and that moment of oneness comes when everybody knows. Like, people know, even now, no matter how tight and well rehearsed you are, people know it's an act. And they know that you've said that before and you've done that before and that joke's not new, and they know. But then when you're off script, they don't know anymore. And suddenly their faces are more alive than they were before. Yours is more alive than it was before, because everybody knows that what's happening right now has never happened again and probably will never happen again. We're off plot and we're having a good time and let's just go with it. Those moments are rare, but you have to risk crashing your entire show to get to them. That's the price. And crashing the hat, You
need jeopardy.
But they're worth it, I think. And Gazzo's had those moments. I've seen Gazzo.
I work the same way myself.
Well, that's the only way to work, I think, for those moments. But Gazzo has them, although people think... I get bored. Yeah, totally bored. And Gazzo seems very tight and it always works, but it doesn't. I've seen Gazzo fail, and I've seen him be like a god out there. So he has those moments too, and I've seen him play with it. I remember once he was on stage in Vegas, and he can be a real bastard, but in a funny way. And we were going to Vegas to the Magic Convention, and the first act on was going to be Whit Hayden. He does a ring routine. He's quite a well-known magician. And Gazzo's on after Whit Hayden. And Whit Hayden, we're staying at Whit's house in LA, and we drive to Vegas. And Whit's quite nervous because he doesn't like performing so much to magicians as he does like a general gig, and because it's a big magic convention, he's very nervous about it. And he's like, "Can you two piss off to the bar and not sit in the audience when I'm on stage?" And we're like, and Gaz goes, "Yeah, come on, Gary, we'll go to the bar. Let's let Whit do his thing." There's an MC after Whit, and I've got like 10 minutes notice, and we'll hear, and we'll come back. We know Whit sets 15 minutes. He can't go over. Let's go to the bar. So we go to the bar and we order drinks. It's in some, I forget which place it was in Vegas. It was some big place like the Golden Nugget or something. And there's lots of famous magicians there, so I can understand why Whit's nervous. Like the Amazing Jonathan and stuff, they're all there. And so we're having a few drinks, and Gazzo turns around and he says, "Come on, Gary, we're going back." I said, "Oh, Whit's not finished yet. It's only 10 minutes." He goes, "No, we're going back." He goes, "Whit's coming up to his finale. He's got about 3 minutes left. We're going back." And I went, "All right." So we walk into the theatre, and Gazzo walks in the door and he goes, "Oh, fuck, are you still on?" And it just completely throws Whit. And like Whit's fuming because it just threw him. And I said, "Why did you do that?" He goes, "Because I knew it was throwing." But then Gazzo goes on, and Gazzo gets... Yeah, but it was funny. But Gazzo goes on, and he gets one of the luckiest... I mean, it's the only time I've seen Gazzo not get a line out, really, because he's doing a show, and he's being his normal, fairly offensive self. And there's a Elvis impersonator, dressed as Elvis, on the front row, watching the show, who's an Elvis that, get this, does magic to spread the word of God. It's a Christian Elvis magic man in full suit. And, he's getting clearly quite annoyed at Gazzo's language and Gazzo's jokes. And he makes a big hoo-ha and gets up to leave and leaves. And Gazzo looks at me and he gets halfway through Elvis Has Left the Building, which was a perfect line, when he looks at me and just cracks up on stage because it's like he couldn't get it out. He goes, "Oh, it's the funniest moment of my life." And I always remember that. But that was a moment for Gazzo. I mean, he was clearly having the time of his life at that moment. So, that's the stuff that's good.
And they can tell. You don't always have to get a line out. Sometimes
everybody
is enough. Genuine laughter. When people hear it,
everybody knew what the rest of the line was. Elvis Has Left a... Everybody knew that what the rest was. He didn't have to get the line out because it was just so funny with the guy walking out the rest of Elvis. So, yeah. But,
So, Gary, we're rapidly approaching 2 hours.
Are we?
We're on 1 hour 45.
Yeah.
Yeah, time flies. Everybody says the same thing.
Weird.
Is there some things in your story you really want to tell? Is there some stuff you really believe should be in your story that you haven't said at this moment?
Probably I could talk all night because that's the sort of person I am. But I quite like to rant about what's wrong with the world, and like I think it was a better world before the internet and before mobile phones, and I think somehow originality probably got stamped out a bit by the internet. I think we're all a bit too overexposed to everything. That's something that's part of my story, I guess. I'm getting very fed up with young people. I've got to be honest. It's really starting to piss me off. What I don't like now is like it's all very well being a right-on socialist and Black Lives Matter and all the rest of it. But what I don't like is the attitude like that you're either with us or you're the C word. There seems to be a complete lack of acknowledgement that people are different. Like people go like, "But Boris is a..." And I'm like, well, I vote Labour all my time, but I don't think Boris is a... I think he's probably all right. He just happens to be a bit right-wing. If I was down the pub with him, I'd probably have a laugh. I know a lot of right-wing people. I know a lot of left-wing people. I know a lot of mad people. I know vegans. They're harder work than anybody. But the point is I think it's wrong to go, "And I'm fucking defending you because you don't..." And I'm like, oh. But on the other hand, I get the Black Lives things matters. I get that they have a rough time of it. I think racism is fairly natural. I think it occurs in all races amongst all people. Like I know white people living in black countries that have had a bad time. It's not to the level that they do in America, and it maybe not. But I think it's a fairly tribal thing. I think we're tribal. The reason a big church breaks away into smaller churches is because we're happier in groups of 200. And that's why there can never be one big religion. And I'm an atheist anyway, so I'd never join. But I get very fed up with this lack of tolerance from the apparently right-on tolerant people. They're starting to really piss me off with their lack of tolerance. Now, I'm all for taking the statues down because I don't know who the fuck they are anyway. I mean, you know, Colson and Bristol and stuff. I don't know who these industrialists are that built the odd hospital. I don't care. Pull them all down. They're not fun. Put up a giant rabbit or something. It would be more fun. So I'm all with that. But let's not start saying that comedies written 30 years ago can't be shown anymore. I think just show it with a warning. You know, it's like the film Dam Busters. The dog is called Nigger. Now, I get that that's bad and I get that it's offensive, but it's 1945. Show it with a historical warning that nobody knew any better back then, and they were a bunch of bigots because that's how they were brought up. You know, Guy, whatever his name was, the bomber who went and did the Dam Busters with his dog Nigger, wasn't deliberately racist because he woke up racist. He just grew up in a society where everybody was like that, and to expect them not to have been like that is slightly wrong. You know, it doesn't mean we shouldn't change.
There's a big complicated debate about it. Definitely,
there is
big complicated debate on what we have permitted and not permissible, and it isn't. Yeah,
but it has to.
Which we could talk about all day, but I don't know.
Could, and my only argument is it's all right. We are moving forward as a society. I get that things are better than they were, and they're getting better. It's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be, they're always going to be racist, always, because there's an awful lot of stupid people. I mean, some of us really shouldn't have left the trees. There's an awful lot of stupid people. I know that because they watch shows. So, if you're smart, you're going to get a coffee.
Well, just to bring it back onto shows. Do you have any advice for any young entertainers who are just getting into the world now?
Yeah, I think don't start as I started, because copying Noel was probably wrong and didn't really do me any favours, actually. It just slowed me down for a couple of years while I had to find my own way of doing it. Thinking you have to do Gazzo's show is probably wrong. There are young performers like Sam King who do it their own way and have their own unique style and are very good. Sam King is great. I love what he does because he decided that he doesn't want to do what everybody else does, and he invents stuff and he comes up with little props and does things with knitting. But so I would go your own way. I think it's all right to trot out some old lines, obviously, because everyone's got to start somewhere, and some old tricks. But I think I wouldn't rely, if I had my time again, because it was very easy when I started because the street paid very well. There weren't that many of us. You could go around the world and you could make a good living. I wouldn't spend all your time, if you was young, on the street. I would make sure you work towards a festival show, an indoor show, and broaden your horizon. I mean, I've seen people who are great on street shows get a gig and they don't know what to do when their hat lines are no longer required. They're like, oh, that's half my show. So I think keep yourself open to having lots of different things. Like if you're a magician, do close up, do some stage work, do this, do that, do mime. If you want, I don't care what you do, but aim at a festival show. I think festival shows, I've seen some great shows recently in the last few years when I've been in Europe, and I've realized that there's a whole other sort of side out there that isn't based around getting money on the street. It's about the artiness of it, and there's some wonderful stuff in Europe. Like the guy, have you seen the guy? I forgot his name. He's got an entire theatre in his tummy. He just looks like he's a big fat bloke with a fake arm, but his tummy opens and it's like the Albert Hall inside. And he'll do things like put a cigarette there and light it and close the thing and the smoke will come out of his mouth and he'll open it up and the cigarette's burnt away, and toilet roll, and he'll pull a thing out of his mouth, open it up and the toilet roll's gone. And, it's just a great, and I'm like, well, you couldn't have done, that would never have turned up through just busking. That is purely for festivals. It takes, you need an arty crowd.
Well, we could have it here if you could do that as a busking thing here if we had what the French have maybe, where they invest and fund in their culture.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because in Europe they fund the festivals, which means that there's a lot more paid festival work in Europe. There's bugger all in England, really, isn't there? You get Fringe once a year and Sidmouth and a few other tiny things, but there's not really...
A couple of small local things. Yeah,
but there's not really that same kind of buzz that you get in Europe, where they're really up for the artiness of it. And they're really supportive of it, too. I mean, what always impresses me about Germany, Austria and places like that is... I mean, I did Freistag a couple of years ago, and I was doing the 3 o'clock show or 10 o'clock show. I forget what it was. I was doing the first one of the day, actually, so it must have been about 11, 12 o'clock, something like that. And I turn up to my pitch, and it's like a windswept ghost. It's like tumbleweed moment. I'm like, I'm on in 10 minutes. There's nobody here. I can't build a crowd out of this. Like 3 minutes to 3, there's 400 people there. It's Austria and Germany. They're just like, no, show starts at 3. We turn up at 2 minutes to 3. They're all there supporting you, and you have a great time. And I'm like, wow. That wouldn't happen here, would it? It'd all be late. The English would all be late.
Well, they'd be late, but then they'd roll up and they'd be drinking through the entire show and be there cheering at the end.
Yeah.
English crowds do have some good things.
I think we're kind. I don't know. I think we always have been a bit rougher than the rest of Europe, really. I think England's always had that rough edge, isn't it? Even the Romans found it hard, let's be honest. The further north they went.
And did you find out? I found this thing. I chat with people about American performers coming over, and when the American performers come over, I always find, at least when they first arrive in England, they're really nice. Like everything they do is like really pleasant. And
yeah,
they're good to their audience. They treat them like reasonable people who want, uncynically to have pleasure. And I look at it, I just think, no, I'm so completely cynical about it. I just think you're oblivious to the horror of the world.
I mean, some people think we moan a lot, but our humour is very cynical, and I mean, the thing that I think my strong point when I'm filming is self-depreciation. I'm the butt of most jokes, really. I talk about my own inadequacies when I'm working. And I think that's why I'm great friends with Gazzo, really, because he can't do that. And we talk about it. He goes, I can't do that. What you do, it seems like you just rant about how inadequate you are. And it's funny. And I go, but I can't.
Does he feel he can't do it?
Because
he's powerful.
Yeah, and I can't do what he does. I can't remember the jokes. You can tell me 5 jokes in the morning, and by the evening, I've forgotten all of them. They just don't stay in my head. And that's...
Oh, interesting. It creates 2 different forms of work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed. I don't know how he holds so many lines in his head, really, because it's like, I don't remember them. I just don't remember them.
It's like a Rolodex.
Yeah, of gags. And some people are great at that, and it's a skill in itself, but my head's full of other nonsense, really, like why the universe is so big and what a waste of time I can't visit any of it. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still
Gary,
yeah.
Would you? It's coming up to the last 8 minutes now. Do you have any closing things to say to all the buskers out there watching, who might watch in the future? In 200 years, they might dust off this video and listen to the words you have to say.
Well, in 200 years, I think you'd be lucky if you're busking. I think it'll be a right old mess by then. There were less than 3 billion people when I was born. There's now 7 billion. So the crowd should get bigger. That's a good thing. I just think, I mean, obviously you're having a rough year because there's no busking now. It's, it's crap. And I don't think that's coming back anytime soon. So I would use this next year and next year to actually work on other types of shows, like a festival show and something else. Or if you're a juggler, learn a bit of magic. If you're a magician, learn a bit or something else. I would broaden your skills. I think the future might be looking towards smaller shows rather than big circle shows, if that's what you do, because I think they're going to become more workable sooner than circle shows. So I'd use the time for stuff like that, for being creative, and working towards a different kind of world, because it may not be as good as it was for quite a while. I think that's looking a bit iffy, isn't it?
I agree with you. I think small terracey kind of shows, things where you can hit and run, stay mobile, move about, do little edges.
I mean, everybody feels like a gob when they do a great hype show. Everybody comes off thinking like, "Oh, I'm the man." But there are times when a little table show or a side show doing a few tricks out my pocket have actually fed me more than, because there were no hype shows there. They weren't possible. There wasn't space. There wasn't the people. But, if you can work 6 people at a bus shelter, and I mean, what an eye-opener for me is, I don't even know it was actually, but years ago I saw somebody come to Stratford, an older gentleman, so he was older than me at the time, was a smart magician, and he literally stood using the bin as his tabletop and did a bit of card magic, and I watched, because he it only took about 5 minutes, the whole thing, and only about 5 or 6 people watched, but I think they all gave him fivers, and I remember thinking, I remember thinking, that's actually pretty good. That's a way better hit rate per person than any hype show. And he hasn't even broken me into a sweat. He'll probably go and sit in the cafe now and have a coffee. And if it looks busy when the theatre kicks out, he'll come and do another one. And so I think that could be a way to go. I mean, at the moment, statues and musicians are doing all right because the buskers are out in Stratford now.
I've done a little bit of terrace work. I've gone to a couple of terraces in Hackney Wick when the bars open and just worked the people sat at the bars. Because the way I felt about it was, I'm not gathering a crowd. They're fucking sat there anyway. I'm not going to feel terrible about that, you know?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And if you can come up with something that you do that they drop money in, like a musician, I mean, I've never cracked it myself, but if there was some way you could stand there and do something that was entertaining enough that didn't involve them having to watch, so that they got it almost instantly. And they thought, yeah, there's skill there. I love that. That's funny. And throw you a couple of quid. That might be the way to go for the next couple of years because you're not forming a crowd. You know, I watch singer guitarists and they've got it made. They sing their song and people can walk past. They can listen at a safe distance. We can't go out there and bark up a crowd anytime soon because people are going to hate us.
Not at the moment. I mean,
no, they're going to hate us.
Yeah. Of course they would.
Yeah.
The exact skill that you develop when building a crowd is the exact skill that now is redundant.
Completely. Yeah. It's just like the worst skill to have. You know, I wish I could stay still and be a statue right now.
Yeah, and we've developed a skill at this moment will bring a death toll up. You know, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, like doom doctors.
Yeah, it'd be a disaster, wouldn't it? Right, street shows now. Yeah. But they will start happening because there will people that will try it, I'm sure. But I don't think it's right at the moment.
I don't either. I mean, I'd like the idea of when, I mean, maybe, I don't know if you're interested in it, looking to it in Stratford, but when everything does open up in earnest, that we get lots of street festivals all over the country.
I think that's the way to go, yeah.
Into the public squares.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I think England needs more of a cabaret kind of street festival-y thing going on. I know Bill Ferguson set one up out in Shropshire and stuff, and that's still going, or is it? I don't know. But there aren't many, are there, really?
To chat with Bill. No, there's not enough. And I think we'll be specifically positioned at this moment to do something about it because all the business models are built for something which isn't happening and isn't viable, particularly in London and in the big cities. It's built for international tourism, which will be none of for a long time.
Yeah, so a couple of years, I suspect. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a couple of very difficult years ahead of us. I think a minimum of this year and next year, personally. I'm
hoping Christmas, January. I'm hoping.
I think you'd be lucky to see any real improvement this side of next spring. I think that's optimistic, but I hope I'm wrong. Because frankly, I'd quite like to get out there and have some fun. Because even though I'm a kind of part-time busker now, I still would enjoy my days out there in the sun and chatting to mates and doing the odd show.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, you still get the old urges.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to say this, Gary. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for watching. Really good.
Thank you for speaking. It's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything I'd like to say as the last moments to everyone out there?
Only that I know I've upset a lot of people over the years, and a lot of people I haven't upset, and that's part of the course. And I never intended to upset people, of course. It's just I'm like the rest of you, a bit needy, and a bit strange. But it's like I'm even putting in, like, take for instance David Castle, another old act. Now we never got on. We've only ever swore at each other, but he's going in my painting because that's not his fault, is it? He might be.
David will be on Friday, in fact.
Huh?
David will be doing an interview on Friday.
Oh, good. Well, send him my regards and tell him he's definitely going in my painting because I understand. I'm old enough to understand that he actually might be far nicer than me. It might be me that's the problem. It's just that we got off to a bad start and never really recovered. But that doesn't mean he's not a good bloke, does it?
No. Just human beings struggling with what it is to be us.
Yeah, lost and confused and hopeless, really. Let's be honest. It is a curse.
Babe screaming in the dark.
Well, it's artiness. Artiness is a curse because you can't really live a normal life if you've got an arty bone in your body, whatever it is, whether it's music, painting, performing, being funny, whatever it is. You're kind of stuffed. Nobody ever gets. The rest of your family don't get it. Your parents don't get it. They all think you're like, oh, we've got a black sheep there, which you can't say anymore, can you? But because apparently that's racist. But apparently there are black sheep, so it just means the odd one out. So we need a new phrase now for black sheep, don't we? What can we have? I don't know. Anyway, but we'll think of one. Dead rabbit.
Coloured sheep.
A dead rabbit.
Yeah.
They think that you're the misfit, and they don't get it. My mum never got it, really. My dad never got it. They didn't understand how I could get away with doing so little for so long, as they put it, and having fun. So that I would just say carry on.
You've created a lot of joy over the years. There's no question of that, eh?
A fair amount of misery. I think I've had my share of both, actually. I think we're all capable of that, and I do lack empathy. I'm not the most caring person in the world. It has to be said. But that doesn't mean I mean anybody any harm. It just means I don't really care. I'm too busy in my own head to worry about your head. So that's. But that doesn't mean, yeah. Well, anyway, it's been lovely.
Go. That's the nice, tight, sewn up, positive ending we were looking for.
Well, this is as positive as I get. I don't really do positive. I don't know if you spotted that. I actually like misery.
Yeah,
I think misery is funny.
I was saying is I'm the same. Well, I think misery is an interesting place to go from.
Yeah, I love my favourite comedies are things like Harold and Maude, because they're dark and they're lovely. There's something about, that's where comedy lies, in the dark side, I think. Hopefully. Otherwise, I've got it all wrong.
Well, I think one of the greatest tools of comedy you can have is that you can deal with a subject matter which otherwise would be untouchable and unattainable.
Yeah, it's the only place.
Within the farce.
Yeah, I mean, music can deal with difficult areas too, I think, because it's odd that we dance to the most miserable lyrics on earth sometimes. It's like if you listen to the lyrics, you sit in your room, oh, it's a dance number. I've always found that really weird. It's like, oh, he just killed himself, his wife left him. Yeah, but it's a dance number. Music can seem to get away with it. It's got a good beat, doesn't matter what happened. And I think, humour's the same.
I mean, I'll put music on to make me sob as well, to feel sad. I'll put music on to drive
I only like miserable music. I don't really like happy songs. I'm happier listening to music. Ironically, I think it's a safe place to listen to misery. It's a palatable way of dealing with misery.
Big Smiths fan, then.
Yeah, any miserable. I love Nick Cave. I mean, the more miserable, the better for me. But to me, they're places where you can visit the dark side without actually feeling that bad. You
get to simulate. You get to simulate the feeling of misery, loneliness, and despair without having to actually.
And getting fit, having a bit of a dance at the same time.
And there you go. You get to have a little bit of a jig. Happy days.
Bit of a jig to the hanging song.
Yeah. Oh, they're playing that strange fruit now. Should we go and have a little bit of a dance?
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
All right.
It is weird.
Gary, all my love. Thank you for whining on with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I look
everyone is watching.
Oh, good. And I hope they watch me finish my painting, which is now about a year. You're going back in. Don't worry about that. Everyone who was in it is going back in it. They were just at the wrong scale. I got something wrong. I do that and then I just start again. But that, I'm getting back there now. I'm back on track. Although it's a mammoth task.
So very soon, we're going to see a picture with 130 of Edinburgh street performers put together by Gary. We look forward to that.
Yeah, there's no sense of time in this painting. I mean, like Pip's only 20 in the painting, but she's obviously my age or nearly my age. So, it's really my life condensed. So that's why people like, David Castle's in the painting because he's part of my life. I don't care if he's ever been to Edinburgh or not. There are quite a few people that haven't been to Edinburgh. It's not really about Edinburgh. It's about the characters that I've known and loved and disliked and all the rest of it. That's what it is.
Yeah. And textures of the tapestry of your life.
A record of all the misfits that I bumped into. Yeah. I mean, one or two of them aren't even performers that are going in it. So that gives you some idea. There's a few people.
What a wonderful project. And what a great thing to see slowly evolve out of this pretty quarantine room.
Yeah, I kind of didn't realise how much work it was going to be. There's 240 windows. When I started, I was like, I can't paint that many windows. I was like, 5 weeks on windows.
Pretty anal about it. You will have to paint every one of those bloody windows.
It gets worse. I've got to do the reflection. I've got to go back and do all the windows again and the moon. And I've still got to write on the clock Forever Free. And it's going to take a year. I think it's going to. I'm hoping to have it finished before Fringe. That's That's the bottom line. But I got
get it put up there. Are you going to sell it? Are you going to auction it? Are you going to keep it for yourself?
I was going to do I was going to do an edition, and I probably still will. I don't know, of limited edition of prints to the number of faces that are in it. So there's 130 people in it. There'll be 130 prints in the edition, and they'll be about A3 or A2 size. I don't know. They're not going to be cheap because I've looked at Glissy prints, and they're probably going to cost 70 quid each to print because you have to use. Yeah. So they're not going to be that cheap, but the painting itself, I don't know what happens to the painting. That never really entered my mind, really. But then, see, I've just got a painting that that's gone to Spain that I sold, and I sold it to Jamie Thompson. Thank you very much. And I got really good money for it, and it's called Tourette's Beach, and it's a beautiful scene of beach stones and pebbles, and you can see through the water and the blurry ones, and all the little bubbles are all individually painted. But when you get up close, it's kind of the reverse of Tourette's. That's why it's called Tourette's Beach. You see the beauty first in this case, rather than the problem first. When you get up close, every swear word you can think of's in that painting, and you've got it in the foyer of a hotel, and it's got you fucking bastards. And you titty.
And it must be a lovely experience for people to see that, because they go, "Oh, isn't that beautiful? Let's go and have a closer look."
Well, he said he's got a Catholic cleaner at the hotel who's about 50. He said, and she's really strict and like never married and everything. And she saw them nearly passed out. But they're tiny. You really got to look for them. He still hasn't found them all. You know, there's about 100 words, but they're painted with a brush like this, and they're tiny and they're really well hidden. But they're there.
So everybody here, if you want to, I'm sure that Gary may be taking some auction bids for that 130-person painting in a year's time.
Well, I was hoping
some offers.
Well, I've got about 9 or 10 people who said they're going to buy a print already. I think
I'll definitely get a print. If
there you go. Yeah, well, I'm going to bring them in as cheap as I can. I don't want to make masses of money out of it, but I want to make enough to cover the. I'm about 400 quid in on the painting so far, just because I use really professional oil paint, and I'm going through brushes like this Rosemary and Co. at a rate of knots. Now this one might only be £7, but it don't last very long. It lasts me a couple of days. I've got like 500 brushes, and of course it doesn't help. I keep painting over it. That costs a lot.
That's all right. Paint over it.
Yeah, well, people get quite upset. Well, it has to be. I mean, I've got another change now. See, I feel really bad about Todd at the moment because I've painted him riding a horse. He's in a window. It's not really, you can't really see it's Todd. It's somebody looking like a cowboy riding off in a horse with a cactus in the distance in a window in one of the flats. And it seems really mean, like Todd's not in the painting, but he is in the painting, of course, but he's not got a decent spot in the painting. But it's so funny, everyone likes it. And I'm like, do I leave it or do I put Todd in the audience? I'll probably cave in and put him in the audience, but everyone's going, don't do that. He looks great on the little horse.
Well, sometimes people quite like the idea of being there, but, like where's Waldo kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, Noel Britton's going on one of the God pillars, because if it wasn't for Noel, I probably wouldn't have started. And Jim Tellini is going on the other one at the front. There's other pillars at the back, but you're obviously going to be a lot smaller because of perspective, so you're going to be a very minor God if you're on one of them. Like, for instance, I was thinking of putting Rumpole. I don't know what he's called these days. I always know him as Rumpole, but God in ages and talks like that and does 2-day shows. Jolly good fella, yeah. Yeah, crikey. See, now I thought of putting him on a pillow, and people would go, well, but why? He's not got the strongest show. And I go, well, it's not about that. He's an unique character. He's a completely unique character who's been there my whole life, completely different. I think he deserves a God spot. Yeah. And they go, yeah, but he didn't do the money lines. I'm like, well, yeah, that's why he's got a God spot.
You think as well, like you see some artists, they influence far more than any of these guys that have got these huge $2,000 hat shows. These artists that earn 20 quid a show influenced and made the groundwork for these people's work to be done.
Yeah, exactly. And it's and I used to, I got into writing my own lines at one point, and it's quite weird when you see other people do one of your lines a long way down the road and stuff. I mean, Gazzo, bless him, when he did a book of lines, did at least credit me on some of them, which weren't mine.
So how do you feel when you saw the people doing your lines?
I don't really mind, because I don't really, I don't like. there's one line I came up with, and Pete Waddell took it because he liked it, and he did ask, to be fair. And it was with a Kennedy $50, and it just came to me in a show. I went, look, this is a Kennedy $50. You can tell it's a Kennedy. His head's no longer on his shoulders. And then I ended up with a whole routine about the Kennedy thing, and people go, oh, Pete's doing that now, and I'm like, well, he's welcome to, because I actually don't do it anymore, because although it's funny, it didn't really suit me. Yeah. You know, it came out one day, people laughed. I did it the next day, and they all went, so I stopped doing it.
Yeah. It didn't fit the character,
yeah,
which is this interesting thing that we talked about earlier, that your stuff has to fit you.
It does have to fit you, and sometimes it doesn't. And some of the funniest stuff I've come up with doesn't fit me. So, and the stuff that the sad thing, I think, for me, is the stuff that's been good that I've come up with has been stuff that's happened by accident rather than by intellectual process. I've just blurted it out in a moment of madness, and it's sort of.
I think that's sad.
No, I'd like to have more. I know, but it doesn't feel like it's my brain doing it. It feels like it just arrived without any thought. And I'm like, I could sit down all day with a bit of paper and I won't come up with anything as good as that. And yet in a moment of madness, it just fell out. And I don't know how it happened. That's weird.
Isn't that a thing like with pool players? You know, pool players, they have a few drinks before they start playing pool.
Yeah.
Because they want to be relaxed and loose in their game. And I think that's a bit like us. If you sit there with a piece of paper and you look at the piece of paper, you go, oh, what the fuck are we going to write? You haven't had your 2 pints. Your 2 pints is the people around you, you know? Yeah,
I think you're right. It's almost impossible to write a gag. It's quite easy to come up with a gag by accident when you're mucking about.
Yes.
And it's just it's weird. I don't understand the process. I mean, obviously some people can sit down and write gags. I struggle. If I write 100 gags, only one of them would be any good.
Yeah, and I've never written a gag at home and gone onto the street and done it and it worked. It's always had to slowly be pushed into another gag that I've done on the street that worked. You know,
I agree.
I've made it up on the street, it's worked there, and you have to, you know.
Yeah, I've written stuff and thought that would be funny and gone out and it's not. And then, but it's been somehow, then it suddenly changes in a subtle way and it is funny. So, yeah, that's the other thing I would say is, like, don't practice too much if you're a magician. I think a lot of magicians practice too much. I think perform too much and practice a little, because I think the performance is more important than the technical skill. For me, anyway. I think every performer I've admired, or even now, like Bill Malone and stuff, Bill Malone's technically brilliant, but he's still a great performer more than anything else. It wouldn't matter whether he was doing magic or doing something else.
Yeah, I think it's a particular thing with magic, isn't there? A lot of young magicians, when they're starting, they do it because they struggle to talk to people. And getting it in the conversation.
I did a gig once with a young lad who was technically brilliant, and he was throwing up in the green room and we were only doing close-up. I mean, that's the easiest job in the world. And I'm like, what are you so nervous about? He goes, well, I don't really leave my room. I don't really talk to people. I don't know what to say. And I'm like, well, you started the wrong way, haven't you? I started talking to people and learned magic later. It's learn to talk first and then learn a trick. It's just easier.
Yeah.
But, you know, they do practice too much and they get too worried about the process. And that's a mistake, I think. I mean, everyone loves Tommy Cooper.
Yeah.
And
be an entertainer.
Yeah. I suppose we better go.
Be an entertainer, not an actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I've been busting for the loo for the last 20 minutes. So I've been trying to.
Yeah.
Too much information.
I got to get my contact lenses out because I'm going a bit. I look like that actor with the one with a dodgy eye that's lower than the other eye. As I got older, my eyes aren't the same, and I forgot what his name is, but he's in all Before Your Time. Eli Warwick or something. No, from the old cowboy films. One dodgy eye. I was just looking at myself on here, and I'm like, geez, how did you get so old and ugly with a dodgy eye? I was beautiful once. Long time ago.
Well, I've got the same thing. Brian's got a good one in terms of the thinker's squint.
Yeah, I just think it might be my contact lenses. I'm going to take them out. Anyway, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Everybody, thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, please go share the videos, have a look at the Patreon so you can support the channel. For now, everybody, thank you.
Surely nobody's watched the whole thing, have they?
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Some do. You had people watching the whole thing. Goodbye. No idea what this